Welcome to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire. We are here for them to take on the Rochester Dragons in their season opener and home opener here in New York City. We're sitting in Manhattan. I'm Charlie Eisenhood alongside Wesley Cronk, and we'll be with you today as the Empire gets set for their game and look to start their season off on the right foot. Wes, what are some of the things we should be watching for in today's game?
Well, this is going to be an exciting night, Charlie. Home opener for the New York team, and it's the second year for the AUDL. They have the tires already met the road, so to say. One of the things that we saw last year is that the expanded field size is going to be a factor. Teams are going to be playing a little bit more wide open. Looking at the flags right now, we've got a good amount of wind moving left to right. It should be a factor. We're going to see a lot of big plays and a lot of scoring down in the left end zone.
Definitely one thing we're going to want to keep an eye out for is how the New York players, many of whom who have not played in an AUDL game before, adjust to the larger field size. The Rochester Dragons last year were not in Rochester, but they were in fact in the AUDL playing in Buffalo. So many of their players come back for a second season, and they're used to this. They're used to this format. They're used to the single game format. They're used to playing on the wide field. And now the Empire do have some players who played in the AUDL last year, notably Izzy Bryant and Hussein Carnegie, Seth Kennedy. They all played for the Connecticut Constitution. So we'll have to keep an eye on how those guys play in this game and how the other guys adjust to the wider field. Why don't we talk through some of the differences between the AUDL rule set and USA Ultimate? One of the things we're going to want to keep an eye out for, of course, is that there are referees in the AUDL. And for a lot of the players out here, this will be the first time they've ever played with a full referee.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. The guys, they're going to have to get used to the calls being made for them. Last year, after the first AUDL season, a lot of the players said that they liked it a lot playing with the referees because it took something out of what they had to be responsible for. Now they can worry about making plays and doing the athletic things that they're on the field to do.
Right, and so certainly it's a big difference. Now, what does it mean in practice? Well, normally in the USA Ultimate rule set, players call their own fouls. So if they go up in the end zone for a disc and their defender hits them on the arm as they're going up to try to catch the disc, they call foul, and either the defender decides to not contest that foul, in which case it goes, it stays with the player there at the spot of the foul, or if they contest the foul, saying no, I did not foul you, the disc goes back to the player who threw it. Here with referees, there's none of that. The referees are making the calls. So if you go up in the end zone and you think you got hit and the referee doesn't call it, that's tough luck.
It's tough.
And that's one of the things that a lot of these players are going to have to adjust to as we see the New York Empire team getting set here on the line. One of the things that the Empire have going for them is that they're taller than the Rochester team.
Definitely.
And as you might expect in Ultimate, that's definitely an advantage. In these windy conditions with the disc tending to float, especially in the upwind direction to your right, you're going to see people who can jump higher and be coming down with the disc. And that means that height is going to be a big advantage.
Oh, that's exactly right, Charlie. And even jumping higher when the wind is moving like this, especially if you're going upwind, it's not always the biggest factor. Sometimes it's just being flat-footed when the disc comes down, because the disc is going to be going up and down. It's not going to be very consistent, and there may be plays where guys have jumped, come down already, and it's whoever's hands highest in the air when they hit the ground who's going to come down with it.
That could definitely be the difference maker. Coaching the New York Empire is Aaron Bell. He finished second in the Callahan voting, which the Callahan Award, of course, goes to the country's best college player.
As voted by the players themselves.
Aaron Bell came in second to Tim Garrett, who you actually played with down in Florida, Wes.
Tim Garrett, one of the biggest factors on this year's championship double-wide team.
That's right.
Playing alongside former Gator Kurt Gibson. Two of them basically took over for that team.
But Aaron Bell brings his experience to the AUDL and to this Empire team, which is certainly going to benefit from his coaching. Now, on the other hand, Rochester is without their main strategic on-field head coach today, Brian Jones. Brian is coaching SUNY Buffalo in the Western New York sectionals upstate in New York as they prepare to enter the postseason, the USA Ultimate Series. That means actually that Rochester is also losing some key players for their squad, many of whom play for SUNY Buffalo.
Ostensibly, if SUNY Buffalo does as well as they're expected to, next weekend they'll also be without them because next weekend's their regionals.
Yeah, Rochester. I mean, the SUNY Buffalo players are going to be out for Rochester. As many of the college players are for AUDL teams. I know that Madison, who plays later tonight, out in the Midwest, is going to be missing a lot of their Wisconsin players. In fact, some of their best players on the team on their defensive line. We'll try to get some score updates at halftime in the other games around the league. And as we're getting set here for player introductions, there's Colin Shaw walking to the sideline. Colin is the co-owner of the New York Empire. Hopefully we'll have him on for an interview sometime this season.
Definitely.
As we continue our live coverage here. This is Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire and the Rochester Dragons. The game is set to get underway here in just a few minutes. We are sitting just behind the pretty and iconic, if I might say, Icon Stadium here on Randall's Island, and you can see the Manhattan skyline in the background. It's a beautiful day in New York City.
Absolutely, a great day for Ultimate.
We've finally gotten past the cold weather that's been plaguing us for so long. And yeah, aside from some wind, it's actually very good Ultimate weather, I think.
Oh, absolutely. The wind, as we keep saying, certainly going to be a factor, but it's coming in gusts. It's dying down. Right now it's pretty calm. I don't think that these experienced players are going to have much trouble moving the disc in pretty moderate winds.
I think that's right. And we're going to hang on here for the pregame introductions, and we'll send you over there right now.
First, the Rochester Dragons.
Now announcing the 2013 roster for the Rochester Dragons. At number 2, Steven Calabrese. Number 3, Harrison Schwarzer. Number 4, David Ferraro. Number 6, Skylar Brunner. Number 8, Dane McCoon. Number 9, John Dean. Number 10, Sean Donnelly. Number 11, Kevin Reed. Number 12, Maxwell Wick. Number 13, Evan Nicolello. Number 15, Dane Warren. Number 20, Joe Becker. Number 24, Zach Smith. Number 28, PJ Bones. Number 33, Steven Reiser. Number 77, Will Sloan. Number 81, Kevin Quinlan. And number 88, Kelly Moses. Now we are introducing your 2013 New York Empire. At number 1, we have Brendan Auerbach. Number 2, we have Matthew Lamar. Number 3, we have Joseph Ouellette. Number 4, we have Joe DeSantoso. Number 6, Seth Pinetti. Number 8, Brenton Hard. Number 10, Izzy Bryant. Number 11, Alan Brown. Number 13, Nicholas Basie. Number 16, Mike Drost. Number 17, Matthew Stevens. Number 19, Hussein Carnegie. Number 20, Lu Wang. Number 22, Jack Marsh. Number 23, Greg Somerville. Number 24, Gabriel Hayes. Number 28, Philip Hay. Number 29, Chris Brenner. Number 31, Alexander Gaskalakis. And number 32, Elliot Dennis. And that is your 2013 New York Empire.
That's your New York Empire and Rochester Dragons introductions. Now we have the national anthem, and we'll be back with you for the game play-by-play in just a few minutes.
Please stand. Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, so does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
And we are live in New York City. This is the New York Rumble versus the Rochester Dragons, and we're getting set for game time here. Let's talk about some of the key players for each team, Wes. I think people we need to watch out for on the New York Empire, certainly people who played in the AUDL last year. Those guys are going to be off to just an early advantage. They know the field, they know where to be, they know how to set up on defense. We see a couple of those players headed out to the line right now. Hussein Carnegie, number 19, they're heading out to the line. An experienced player for the Connecticut Constitution. He was injured a lot of last season. Other players on this line, Seth Canetti, number 6 right there. He also played in the AUDL last year. And we'll see them together on the offensive line, I believe, to start. Well, it's unclear exactly who will be pulling at this point. Yes, Rochester will be pulling. So some other key players on the line, Izzy Bryant for the New York Empire. We'll have to see which other guys sort of step up to make an impact. Being this the first game, we might see some experimentation in lines. And of course, number 22, Jack Marsh, who captains New York's elite club team, Pony. He's one of the few Pony players on this team, but he's probably the best player on the team and certainly one of the best players in the Northeast.
Oh, absolutely. Jack Marsh is a name that everybody in the Northeast knows, both from his time playing on Pony and his history in college playing at Wisconsin. Other guys that we see, number 20, Lu Wang, probably a guy not a lot of people know about, but anybody who's played college in the Northeast recently has heard the name, all-region player.
And let's head over to the Rochester sideline. David Ferraro, a pony player as well, who plays with Jack down here in New York City during the USA Ultimate Club Series, should be making a big impact for them. He may be one of their top players today. Zach Smith, number 24, a strong player out of Rochester. And the game is underway as Rochester pulls to about half field upwind, and the Empire set to get moving here on the line. That's Seth Canetti picking up the disc, centering, and that's an early D by Rochester. And they'll pick up the disc here with a short field and a chance to attack upwind. This is a good opportunity. And that's Zach Smith with the disc. He throws to Kevin Quinlan, who holds the disc in the middle of the field. And he's looking now for his dump. Number 4, that's David Ferraro with the disc. And there's a D right back. And you saw that disc float up in the air, and that's what we're going to be seeing all night, Wes.
Oh, absolutely. Rochester had the chance for an early break going upwind, but now we're going to see the Empire see if they can.
And there's
throw it
Jack
in.
Marsh with a flick to the end zone. Oh, and the layout from Hussein Carnegie just misses the disc in the end zone. And we're going to see that connection all night, I think, Wes.
That's the exact thing that we were predicting, you know, big plays to the end zone on the left. Already we've got a deep shot seconds into the game.
And the fact of the matter is that although the wind has died down a little bit since we started the broadcast, it's going to be difficult for the Rochester to move the disc all the way up the field against this athletic Empire offensive line.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not the lulls in the wind have an impact on the game. Right now there's not a lot of wind. Rochester moving the disc pretty smoothly.
Kevin Quinlan with the disc here on the sideline. And he's going to center the disc back to the middle. And of course you want to keep the disc in the middle of the field where you're going to have a little bit more opportunity to attack both sides of this wide AUDL field. Not much impact from the referees yet in this game. And there's our first foul call of the game.
It was interesting a few seconds ago. You could tell the Rochester player reacted as if he was playing in a USA Ultimate game.
Oh, and he's been penalized. Rochester player has been penalized for flopping, and they'll move the disc back 5 yards as we get back underway. There's an open disc, and a nice catch there from Kevin Quinlan, who's had a great start to this game. We got a disc deep to the end zone. Number 1, Brendan Auerbach underneath it. Looking for the disc, reaching out, and there's no call from the referee. Good. And that disc is going to come back down the field as the Empire pick it up.
Good opportunity for Rochester with the obvious height mismatch going upwind.
Yeah, and that's what you have to be looking for in this kind of game. And you know, that was a nice throw upwind there. That could have been a real opportunity for Rochester to get out to an early lead.
Plenty of chance to catch the disc.
Now I got the disc stuck on the sideline here. And another drop. A rough start for the Empire in this game. Kevin Quinlan centering the disc there. Zach Smith is moving, cutting nicely underneath. John Bain with the disc, with a nice flick to Jack Smith, who catches it just 5 yards outside the end zone, and there's a stoppage.
Lots of movement on that disc going upwind.
Yeah, it's you gotta catch it with both hands coming together like you're trying to catch a pancake, as we call it in Ultimate. You can't try to reach out and grab it like you were trying to reach out way in front of you, because there's a lot of chance that the disc is going to move a little bit up and down. Now, we have an injury here as a Rochester player heads to the sideline. We hope he's doing okay. I believe that's TJ Burns, number 28. Zach Smith here with the disc, and Izzy Bryant will be marking him. And this is a real opportunity for Rochester to punch in an early score upwind. Zach Smith looks to the center of the field and just overthrows his receiver. There's a wide open Empire player heading downfield. That's number 4, Joe Santussis. Brandon Auerbach with the disc. He finds Izzy Bryant in a powerful position there on the sideline. Here's Jack Marsh. Marsh dangerous with the disc. Looks downfield to, that's Goose Alette. And there's Hussein Carnegie in the end zone, and he brings it down, and the Empire take their first lead of the season. And we'll see a lot of scoring today from Hussein Carnegie, I believe. It's 1-0 Empire over the Dragons, and the Dragons have to be a little frustrated that they let that one get away.
You know, the Dragons, they had probably more chances than they expected going upwind this early in the game. And the Empire took advantage of their, I guess, inability to take advantage of their opportunities.
Well, I mean, I think we saw the wind there on that swing pass from Zach Smith off the sideline. Just couldn't quite connect into the middle of the field. And that's good pressure from the Empire offensive line. And now we'll get a chance to take a look at their defense and see who's playing out there for the Rochester offensive line. See Zach Smith back on the line.
Going to see a lot of Zach tonight.
I think so, especially with some of their SUNY Buffalo players out. And nothing much from the referees. I think there was some physical play downfield, and no calls yet so far. We may have that kind of a game.
Yeah, we'll see. This is the first game for the players of the season. It's the first game for the referees of the season. So there's going to be an adjustment curve for them where they kind of get used to the amount of calls that are going to be accepted throughout the game.
Well, and we saw down here on that 5-yard penalty against Rochester and here's the pull up for the Empire.
Short pulls tonight.
Yeah, it's tough to get up into that wind. And we've got Izzy Bryant playing both ways early in the game. Looks like he's setting the mark with Gabe Hage right nearby.
Will Sloan on the offside.
Yep, he'll be looking to take that swing probably into the middle of the field where you want to keep that disc in this AUDL game.
Be interesting to see whether or not he stays with a handler spot. Clear mismatch in height.
With Gabe Hage on the mark here.
And it's up.
And we got a big huck to the end zone already. And Rochester just can't quite get a hold of it. And now the Empire will get their first chance to head upwind as they look for the score. That's Lou Wang picking up the disc. Be one of their main defensive handlers tonight. Izzy Bryant back as well. Number 28, TJ Burns on the mark. Lou Wang finds Mike Drost underneath. It's on the far sideline. Back to Lou Wang. Excuse me, that's Izzy Bryant there, number 10.
I believe we have an injury call. Someone's down in the stack.
And this turf field, not so forgiving on the knees.
Not at all.
It's good in New York City because it doesn't get torn up. These fields are used constantly by soccer teams, lacrosse, ultimate. And there's a big huck from Izzy Bryant. It's floating. Oh, and number 11, Alan Brown, can't quite come down with it. Probably should have kept running with that one.
Got to keep running going upwind.
And now we've got Rochester in a powerful position on the sideline. Doesn't put it up. Coming back around to the middle. And that's just, that's a lazy attempt right there.
Got to go two hands.
You just have to be patient, especially with no defender. And now Empire have a chance, but Izzy Bryant throws it right back, and Izzy's looking for the foul, but he's not going to get it. And they're letting him play early here.
Absolutely.
TJ Burns with the disc. Swings it over to Zach Smith on the far sideline. And here's Will Sloan. And he can't find his receiver downfield. Sloppy game to start. I think, you can chalk some of that up to the wind, but I think there's probably some nerves out here too as people get under the way. Everybody's feeling a little bit tense. Maybe the first time they've played in front of a crowd. A couple hundred people here on hand at the first Empire home opener.
Yeah, and Charlie, you have to keep in mind that these are relatively new teams in existence. These guys haven't all played together before, so that'll take some learning.
And number 11, Alan Brown with the disc on the sideline, and he's been called out of bounds by the referee. And notice how he played right through that. That's the move you have to make in the AUDL. And here's number 77, Will Sloan, looking to the center. Nice grab there from Stephen Glosser. Sloan back, but gets looked past. And that's TJ Burns looking deep to the end zone. To a wide open Zach Smith, who pulls it down, and Rochester ties it up 1-1. And, I expect we're going to see a pretty close game today just because of this wind.
Absolutely.
It's going to be hard for the teams to get breaks up into this far end zone.
Yeah, and those breaks are going to be valuable. It'll be interesting to see if the defense changes to protect those breaks once they've gotten them.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about the defense as we go through the game here. I think one of the things we're going to see less of that you might expect to see in a USA Ultimate game is zone.
Oh, yeah.
Zone defenses are very effective in the USA Ultimate field because the field is narrow enough that you can put a lot of pressure on the person with the disc. But on this wide field, there's just so much room to get open and swing the disc across the field that if you go from sideline to sideline, you're going to have 5 seconds before any defenders are going to be able to set their mark on you which is just too much of an advantage. But of course, in the AUDL, double teams are also legal. So it'll be interesting to see if we see some double teams thrown into this match to try to pressure the disc, potentially when it's on the sideline.
Absolutely. And you know, the teams may want to move sideline to sideline because of this wind.
And here we go. Empire heading back downwind. Jack Marsh going deep, and they're looking for him quick. Jack Marsh. It's hard to outthrow Jack Marsh, I'll tell you that. The guy is blazing fast in his pink cleats, but you can't pick that one up. Floated just a little too far in this wind. And another turnover.
Rochester certainly getting a lot of opportunities going upwind to start this game.
Both teams with their defenses getting a chance. There's David Ferraro. He's a guy to keep an eye on out here on the field. And Sean Donlan with the disc on the sideline. And there's Hussein Carnegie with a nice D. And we're going to have to keep an eye on him now as he sets the stack. Number 6, Seth Canetti with the disc.
Great
Swings
swing.
the disc in the middle for Brendan Auerbach. Around to Jack Marsh on the far side, using this field nicely. And looking back to the end zone for Hussein Carnegie, but can't quite reach him. And back we go, up the field.
The wind seems to be changed a little bit. It's coming at us a little bit more.
Yeah, I was going straight downwind earlier this evening.
That's probably the toughest corner you could have gone to for the Empire.
And here's Kevin Quinlan with the disc. To Ferraro, back to Quinlan. And how he puts it up deep, that's a nice throw to the end zone. But the Empire player is just faster than the Rochester player and outruns him. And that was number 3, Goose Roulette.
Pure hustle play.
It's a great hustle play, and that's what it takes. That's Skylar Brunner, number 6 there on Rochester. And that's, you know, one of the things that's going to make a difference going further in this game is what's the fitness level of these players. You know, the wide field makes you have to run a lot more. Canetti swings to the middle of the field for Auerbach. Over to Joe Santussis. Back to Auerbach on the far side. Now we get around. We got a wide open cutter going deep. Matthew Stevens. That disc's floating up a little bit, but his defender can't see it. And despite the bump from Sean Donlan, no call from the referees, as Stevens really didn't get a good read on that disc.
In a USA Ultimate game, more often than not, I'm going to say that's coming down with a call.
That's probably going to be a foul. And there's an overthrow there. We have Canetti with the disc. And they're moving down the field, and there's another score for Hussein Carnegie, his second of the game. And it's 2-1 Empire. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire versus Rochester Dragons game. Thanks for being with us. If you're just joining us, we are underway in the first New York Empire game of the season here in Manhattan. You can see the sun is setting behind the Manhattan skyline in the background. It's a beautiful evening here in New York City. You can just see the Empire State Building poking up there in the back behind the flagpoles.
So yeah, it's a beautiful evening for Ultimate. So far we have 3 scores, all in the downwind end zone, pretty much as expected.
Yeah, no surprises so far, except maybe that there have been more turnovers than, you know, might be expected of teams that have been practicing now for a couple of months.
Absolutely. The upwind, downwind situation, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some zone, because we've seen some pretty
There's a nice rolling pull.
pretty questionable side-to-side swings so far.
Yeah, they've been reluctant to look deep, but considering how much trouble people have been having getting it up the field against the wind, it's a dicey throw there, and here's Zach Smith with the disc in the middle of the field. He gets the disc downfield. Rochester moving nicely. Loose defense from New York. Zach Smith makes a strike cut just outside the end zone. He's looking to punch it in. Can't find his guy in the corner. And a hand block. That's a huge block
Let's see if they can
from the
capitalize.
Empire. And now they'll have a chance to go back up the field was a very nice play from number 2, Matthew Lamar.
Heat rises.
And off they go back up the field.
Heat rises.
This would be a chance for the Empire to get out to an early lead, but they turn it over right away. And now Rochester is in a position to score quickly. The disc's in the middle of the field. They're about 10 yards back. It's a very powerful position to score from. That's Will Sloan with the disc. He finds Zach Smith just outside the end zone, who punches it in. We're all tied up here in New York. It's 2-2.
Rochester Dragons, Zach Smith to
All downwind still.
TJ Burns puts that one in. And what we're seeing early is the playmakers from both teams stepping up. David Ferraro, Zach Smith, both making good plays. TJ Burns there. Will Sloan's been good with the disc as well. And on the New York side, of course, Hussein Carnegie with the team's only 2 scores. Jack Marsh playing well. Izzy Bryant. And the wind, however, has really died down. We're down to probably 6-mile-per-hour winds.
Coming straight at us.
What is going to, obviously it's early in the game, but what are some adjustments that you think these teams are going to need to make to sort of get some momentum going in their favor? Both teams sort of, at least at this point, patient and just happy to let the game just go downwind and not really struggle up the field.
Well, one thing that we're going to have to see is a score in the right side end zone. It'll be interesting to see later in the game if it stays close whether or not the teams start putting their offensive players out on defense to try to get that upwind momentum.
And here's some nice movement now from New York as they come down the field. And that's Canetti with a wide blading flick into the end zone to number 17, who can't come down with it. That was a nice look to Matthew Stevens, but no, just a little too much float on that disc, and it's hard to make that play over defender.
Tough in the wind to put the face of the disc into the wind like that.
But you know what? I think that the Empire offensive line is happy to let Rochester try to work it all the way up the field, which is exactly what we were talking about earlier. And they're going to challenge them to work it all the way up on them.
Yeah, they haven't had a lot of problems stopping them going upwind yet.
Here we go around to Maxwell Rick on the close sideline, who swings it back into the center of the field to Ferraro. Empire D a little loose, and now they look deep. But this disc is hanging up in the air a little bit. Taller player can't come down with it. Zach Smith looking for it. But good defense from Joe Santussis, who forced Zach to try to make a play on that rather than just letting it come down into his breadbasket.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see a huck straight away here.
We're in the first quarter here in New York City. It's tied 2-2. The Empire taking on the Rochester Dragons. And here's number 3, Goose Ouellette, with the disc on the sideline. And they've really had no trouble working it down this forced sideline. Be interesting to see. Oh, and there's a hammer deep into the end zone. And there's Hussein Carnegie. And that's an easy score. Hussein Carnegie with his 3rd score of the game. And certainly if you put him on your fantasy team, you've got to be happy tonight because he's been making plays. Hussein 3, Rochester 2.
Well, you talk about adjustments, Charlie. Someone's going to have to cover Hussein tonight.
The question is, can anybody cover Hussein? We played with Hussein at NYU. He came up in the New York system. He's sort of a born and bred New York Ultimate player. He comes from a soccer background. He played very high-level high school soccer and could have gone and played D1 level, but chose to get an education instead of playing soccer. Ended up at NYU and started playing Ultimate and has grown into one of the most explosive players on the East Coast. And you can see that earlier in this game. He's just faster and springier than many of the players that are going to be facing him on defense.
Oh, absolutely. Downfield, there's not anybody else I want on my team besides Hussein Carnegie, because he, more often than not, is going to come down with the disc.
One of the things we're going to need to pay attention to here is disc management. I think that's going to be one of the most important things in this game. As teams look downfield, looking downwind, it's okay to turn it over down near the end zone, but if you get a turnover up here in the second half, that can be costly because the other team could easily punch it in with just one throw. And here's number 20, Joe Becker looking deep, and a huge grab there. And that's a score. Harrison Schwartzer comes down with the disc, and it's 3-3.
Simple as that.
This game is tied We're in New York. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire versus the Rochester Dragons here in the AUDL. This is the league-wide opening day. There were some games last week in the Midwest, but many of the teams get underway for the first time this weekend. Earlier in the day, the Toronto Rush rolled past the DC Breeze in Washington. Toronto projected to be the top team in the Eastern Conference and potentially the top team in the league. The Midwestern Conference, of course, has its own powerhouses. Windy City out of Chicago, the Radicals in Madison, the Minnesota Wind Chill, also going to be a very good team. And last year finalist, Indianapolis, can never be counted out. But here in the East, the Rumble look like they might be the second best team, and certainly we'll see what happens so far in the season. Seth Canetti here on the far sideline. Joe Santussis in the middle there. Disc now with Goose on the sideline. And it goes big, deep. Hussein underneath that disc. Can't come down with it. Almost makes another big play. And Rochester again with a chance to... And we are at the end of the first quarter.
What are your impressions so
The
far?
score
Charlie?
is tied 3-3. And, you know, feeling like the teams are still getting their legs underneath them.
Absolutely. You know, it's interesting. We talked about the college guys not being here earlier in the broadcast, and when they do show up, they're going to be at the end of their season. They're going to be in peak condition. It'll be interesting to see the impact that, you know, the different additions have to these teams, because, you know, it's clear that these guys are getting their legs under themselves.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things that we're going to see is how the teams adjust during the game.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as we mentioned at the beginning of the broadcast, many of these players haven't played together much this season, and certainly this is their first real game of the season. For many of them, it's the first time on the AUDL field, and that's going to make it challenging to make plays.
Well, speaking of adjustments, you know, we talked about it earlier. That's the importance of having a coach with you, right? And the Rumble have their coach and their coaching staff, but the Empire rather. But the Rochester Dragons are without their head coach.
Yeah, and you know, certainly they've got assistant coaches here with them today. So, you know, how much of an impact does that make? It's hard to say, but you know, not having your main strategic coach on the field with you definitely makes it challenging. But we'll see here as we get away. You know, a lot of time left in this game, right? 3-3. It's going to be a low-scoring game. No surprise there. A lot of turnovers, the wind. But you know, what we're seeing from the Empire so far, just it looks like it's going to be difficult for Rochester to score against their offensive line.
Absolutely.
And, you know, they had a chance right there in the first point of the game, just 5 yards out of the end zone, but they couldn't punch it in. And, you know, you wonder, are they going to get another opportunity? Because it appears that Empire have already changed their strategy somewhat and started putting the disc up earlier in their possessions to try to hit somebody deep, even if it's just a jump ball. And, you know, can Rochester work the full way up the field?
Yeah.
Of course, you could say the same thing about the Empire. They haven't shown any ability to move it up past half field either.
Wow. The thing is, we talked about this earlier. The Empire, clearly, their offensive line is athletic, and they have a height advantage. So, you know, if Rochester is going to make a break going upwind, they are going to have to make some sort of adjustment to counteract that. You know, it's going to be hard for them to compete, because these are guys who probably grown up playing D-line, playing for the Empire's O-line.
Yeah, and, you know, I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is that I don't think either team has done a very good job of taking advantage of the field yet.
No.
Mostly it's looked like pretty conventional offense. 2 or 3 handlers back, cutters either in a vertical or a horizontal stack downfield. And while we wouldn't expect to see anything drastically different, we would expect to see a little bit more usage of the far sidelines. I feel like we haven't seen the discs swing out way to the edges like you might expect, because for the downfield cutters, there's just so much room to get open that they need to take advantage of that if they're trying to to get up in this game.
I have to imagine part of that has to do with the win factor. We've already seen a few swing passes going awry, and these guys, they want to manage the disc and keep it so that the other team doesn't have those opportunities. So maybe they'll start spreading out if the wind dies down, but you're absolutely right, Charlie. They're not using the wide field to the advantage that they could.
Remember that New York, of course, has the advantage of the home crowd. That's one thing that you don't experience in the USA Ultimate Series is having a crowd as we get underway here in the second quarter, and that could come into play, especially late in the game. And here we go. Rochester picks up the disc, and they're moving straight away. Number 28 with the disc in the middle of the field, and they're looking deep, but that disc's floating up. And they can't make the play after a huge D. Beautiful stuff from Izzy Bryant in the back of the end zone.
I have to say, that's nonchalance again. That was a catchable disc.
Yeah, I thought if you go up and attack that, maybe you come down. And here we go. Empire with another opportunity to try to work the disc up the field. Izzy Bryant with the disc. He takes it in. Philip K cutting downfield here at the back of the stack. Now he's got the disc in his hands. Looks deep, nothing there. Working it up the far sideline right now. Still going, there's Bryant, but he's out of bounds. That's a turnover for the Empire, and that kills because they were getting close. That's the first time they've worked it to half field this whole game. There's a little hammer over the top. Can't pick it up. And back go the Empire. Now they've only got to go 3/4 of the field. Could this make the difference? Lou Wang with a nice step around backhand right there. Here's Philip K with the disc. Back to Wang in the middle of the field. Throws the around flick. Here's Alan Brown with the disc. He rips it to the end zone. There's two Empire players, but no, a pretty block from the Rochester player. But he's down. He's hurt. And you can see the effect of the wind on that particular throw. A throw that looked good out of the hands, but when it got to the end zone, it just really flattened out and didn't have enough carry for either of the Rumble players, or the Empire players in the end zone to make a play on it. And it hurts not to have a shot at that disc at all, right? What you want to see, and we see Hussein Carnegie going into the game off of the injury. And interesting, he's getting that opportunity to play defense despite playing on O-line most of the game.
Well, I think that play that we just saw is the reason that Hussein's in the game, because with the discs floating like that and stopping short, you need someone who's going to go up and get the disc to make that break.
And back come the Dragons. Both teams using the far side of the field more. Flick force here from the Empire. Disc on the sideline. And it's been challenging for, there's a deep shot. They finally get one. Number 24 has separation, but the disc is just too far. And it's hard to put touch on the disc downwind right now.
Landed in the end zone, but just right out of the receiver's reach.
Well, we've seen the wind both ways, right? Going downwind, the disc has gone too long, too blady. And going upwind, it's either gotten too flat and close to the ground, or it's floated up and hung up in the air. Both of which you don't want on offense.
Right.
A sloppy game so far here in New York. The score is still 3-3.
Speaking of sloppy.
And another turnover here. Empire not getting their chances, and there's a disc up into the end zone. That looks nice.
Brown with the D.
But Alan Brown gets the D. The Empire with another chance to bring the disc up the field. They're going to have to turn over the ticky-tack turnovers. There's Hussein Carnegie with the disc. As they go up the sideline to number 16, Mike Drost. Lu Wang is a handler there. And another turnover for the Empire.
hits his receiver in the back that time.
There's a miscommunication there between the handler and the receiver. And Rochester now with a short field. They should be able to handle this pretty easily. The travel was called, and travels, as opposed to in the USA Ultimate rules, travels are an instant turnover
By the handlers.
by the handlers. If you have the disc and you travel, which means that you move your pivot foot before you release the disc, that's a turnover. Oh my goodness! And there's a huge play. And number 20 puts it up to the end zone. And the Empire get their first break of the game as Luang finds Hussein Carnegie, who punches it into the end zone for the score. And it's 4-3 Empire, and that could be just what they needed to take a lead into the second half.
Carnegie just doing everything for this team right now.
He got open, made a big play right there on the sideline, passed his defender, and punched it in for the easy score with no defense back. And it's 4-3, New York leads in dusk here in Manhattan. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire versus the Rochester Dragons. Hussein Carnegie walks down the sideline here after now racking up 3 goals and an assist for having a part in every single one of the Empire goals so far. An impressive stat line so far from a young player out of NYU.
You can hear from the stands the Hoost call coming out already.
It sounds like a boo, but it's not. It's a hoos. And the Empire well on their way. That's an important score in this game. It may not seem like much, just an individual score in Ultimate, but that's what we call a break, which means that the defensive line scored, and they'll get another chance here on defense. And particularly in this game, because of the wind, that's going to be an important score for them. Here's Izzy Bryant pulling it downfield. He's going to throw a roller. This is the first time we've seen it pull from this side. That's going to roll right on out of bounds, right near the pylon.
First time we've seen a D-line play back-to-back points. This is where fitness really comes in.
Stephen Gloucester puts the disc up, but there's nobody there. And I think that strategy probably makes sense. Tries to try to get the disc up the field. But, you know, the Empire definitely with the advantage here considering the wind. Here's Izzy Bryant with the disc on the sideline. Puts it up to number 32, Elliot Bemis. Centering the disc there to Matthew Lamar. And he puts it up deep, but that disc is turning the wrong way from his offensive player downfield. And Rochester will get the disc back and have to work it up.
Didn't look like his receiver even saw that coming. It was already down there before he even got turned around.
You know, one of the beautiful things about Ultimate is the way that you can shape the disc in the air. And the shape of that disc was wrong. Instead of trailing back in towards the cutter, it was trailing out of bounds, making that disc almost impossible to catch even for a very fast player. And here comes Rochester. That's Dan McCune with the disc.
We're seeing our first look
There's
at
a
his
big
zone.
look. And the Empire player just simply runs past the offensive player, number 28, TJ Burns, who just didn't have much sideline left to work with there.
Charlie, I don't know if you noticed, but on that point, the Empire brought out a zone on the handlers. They're double teaming because that's legal here, and it forced a bad throw.
Worked right away. Effective downwind strategy, perhaps. And there's Izzy Bryant putting it up to the end zone. That's floating to the right-hand side. Number 3 chasing the disc. That's Joseph Gousselet. And he comes down with the disc. What a play. A beautiful throw from Izzy Bryant from here on the sideline. And it's 5-3 Empire.
That's what we call bookends in this biz.
Yes, it is. Bookends, a back-to-back D block or interception, followed by the score. And that's worth bonus points. It's 5-3 Empire over the Rochester Dragons. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire home games here just outside of Icon Stadium in New York City. And we've got a timeout here. And it's, you know, it's definitely, despite only being down 2, it's time to regroup for Rochester because it's a daunting long field for them right now. They just haven't shown the ability to move upwind. And now with the aggressive marking and zone look there from Empire, we might see more of that considering its effectiveness.
Well, it's a tough time for Rochester to take a timeout because, even though they need to regroup, they would have had the Empire defense on the field for the third consecutive point. So any advantage that gave them to score on this next go, it's eliminated because they get a rest too.
The wind has picked back up slightly here in New York. So you see the flags in the background. And we'll see here what happens coming into the second half. As we head into halftime here, only a few minutes left in the second quarter. The Empire, everything going their way right now. They've got back-to-back scores. And Rochester's offensive line coming back out onto the field. They'll want to punch one in here, just make it smooth and get things back on track and get their defense back onto the field. You don't want to fatigue your guys too much. One thing we've seen from Rochester, they're running a pretty tight rotation. We've seen Zach Smith playing both ways, one of their top players, which is good, but on a big field like this, it's hard to play back-to-back-to-back points.
Absolutely.
And we're going to need to see what happens here in terms of fitness going forward. It's 5-3 New York. So we get set here after the timeout. And here comes the pull from the Empire.
One of the better pulls so far.
Yep, that's about 3/4 of the way up the field. Considering the wind, that's not bad at all. And we got the disc coming around here to Will Sloan on the sideline, who finds number 3, Harrison Schwartzer, downfield. Back to Sloan, who throws it to no one. And Izzy Bryant's going to pick it up. And this is another opportunity for Empire to extend their lead. They're just 5 yards out of the end zone. Over to Lou Wang. He's got a lot of space. The mark isn't very tight. Flips it over to number 23, Greg Somerville. Back to Wang. And he flies it inside out. Backhand, a pretty throw to Izzy Bryant for the score. And it's 6-3 as the Empire extend their lead. And they're in control of this one, Wes.
Just an amazing throw by Lou Wong right there, but we could hear this coming from the stands. It seems like the Rochester player thought the referee was on their squad, swung the disc back to the ref. And interesting, we always hear this debate, but
and they are going to be able to take a big lead into halftime if they can convert this downwind point here. And here comes the pull.
Great pull.
And of course downwind, that's a pretty pull, floating down nicely into the end zone. And Zach Smith taking that pull. Coming around here on the sideline to TJ Burns. And they're mixing up the marks here. We've got a little bit of a zone look from New York again as the Rochester tries to come back upfield, and then we see a floaty disc right away. The Rochester player comes down with it. Bodies flying everywhere right now. Referee is still letting them play. Burns with the disc around the close sideline.
Laser throw.
Tries to throw it across the field. A nice idea, but it doesn't connect. And here comes Lou Wang to pick up the disc for the Empire.
That's why the Empire threw that zone. They wanted to force a hard throw in this wind, and they did exactly what they wanted to.
And here's Wang with the disc. Number 4, Goose Santussis in the middle of the field. Looking downfield. There appears to be a call from the referee down on the far side of the field. And penalty for New York. Disc going back 5 yards. That's Mike Drost with the disc. And players still getting used to the yardage penalties like this. Not a common part of USA Ultimate games. Here's Goose with the disc. Lou Wang on the strike cut. Doesn't get open, and there's a turnover, and this is dangerous for New York. Here comes Rochester picking up quickly, but they haven't been able to get out in transition, something that they're going to want to try to probably turn on in the second half. Maybe the only way that they can get effective scoring against this New York team, and there's no mark right now. Here's Zach Smith with the disc, swinging it around to Harrison Schwartzer, who rips it deep. No defense there on Joe Becker. Becker looking for somebody. Finds Smith. Around. Inside. Back into the middle of the field. Throwing the blade, but wow. Just a little bit impatient there. And turns it over.
That's gotta hurt if you're Rochester, because that is the best chance they've had at the upwind end zone so far, and they kind of squandered it.
End zone offense is very important in Ultimate, and especially in the AUDL. You're not going to get that many chances down on that side of the field, and we've got a timeout now from New York, and it looks like they want to talk something over here before they head back down the field. That was a little bit sloppy on defense from New York, and they're lucky to come away with the disc.
Well, to me, Charlie, it seemed like they had a little bit of a miscommunication. They were coming out with a zone look down in the end zone when Rochester caught the pull, but when they had to switch on the fly, there wasn't that communication. There's the handler in the middle of the field for a long time without a mark. Guys coming out of the stack to come cover swing passes. There's some obvious miscommunication on that point. I'm sure that's what the coaches are telling them about very forcefully right now.
Everyone in the crowd, get ready
And the
for
fluidity of Ultimate requires you to be able to go quickly from offense to defense, much like you would in soccer or basketball. We're midway through the second quarter here, and your Empire lead 6-3. They're going downwind, looking to punch it in to take really command of this game. Right now it's looking very good for the Empire, but they just about gave up one up into this upwind end zone. But New York still leads 6-3 as the second quarter is beginning to wind down here.
Score currently 6-3, New York Empire.
And the Empire with the disc here looking to go downfield and punch it in, take the 7-3 lead.
Still talking over their strategy coming out of the timeout.
Yeah,
you can see their coach pointing to that, the far side of the field downwind in the end zone. Pretty much the death corner going that direction.
Yeah, I want to set up the play here, and we got a double team early from Rochester. It's a tough place to have the disc, and he puts up a throw to Lu Wang. No defenders around, dangerous throw, but wide open like that, it works.
That's what happens when you
swings
have
the disc over to the far side of the field. Maybe that's what they talked about in the timeout. Lu Wang with the disc in the middle of the field. Over to number 23, Greg Somerville, who gets it down, and they'll rip it deep. There's 3 defenders, 2 offensive players, and a big block from Rochester. Nice play.
Rochester needed a big play like that.
And, they got a little bit lucky. Both of the Empire players were behind the defenders, but the disc wasn't put up quite far enough. Maybe a little bit too much of an adjustment after throwing some discs away earlier in the game. Here come the Dragons back up the field.
The Empire back in the zone.
And a big block straight off the bat. Matthew Lamar with the block. And here's Lu Wang with the disc. It's a double team, but Lu Wang punches it into number 4. That's Goose's first score of the game. Bookends for Goose. And it's 7-3 New York. This game is all New York right now. What does Rochester need to do to get back in this game?
Well, the first thing is disc security. We saw on that last point, they brought the disc all the way up the field and had a great chance at putting it into the end zone, going upwind, a break that they pretty desperately needed at this point, and they just squandered the opportunity. If they're going to get back into this game, they're going to have to string together a couple points, and that means moving upwind and holding on to that disc. If they're not able to do that, they can trade points till the end of the game, and the lead that the Empire has currently is just going to stay there.
It's going to stay there. I mean, really, I don't think teams can continue to blame the wind. It is just not as windy as it was at the start of this game.
These are professional Ultimate teams. The wind should not be what keeps one team from winning or losing.
Yeah, and we'll see if we can see some adjustments heading into the second half. Here's Zach Smith on the sideline as Rochester works down the downwind side of the field. That's Ferraro there in the orange cleats. as they put it down the field. Harrison Schwartzer with the disc. Thought maybe we would have a call there, but no, they're letting them play. There's a lot of contact and really letting them play through it.
Well, you can tell that the guys who are used to the USA Ultimate rules are expecting calls a lot of times.
Glouser has the disc. They're working it on the sideline. The handler's there, taking control. TJ Burns been getting open all game. A big layout there.
Good attempt by Alan Brown on the mark.
Alan Brown laying out, but can't quite come up with it. And here's number 77, real slow block.
Stop. Empire disc. 2
But
minutes
another
left in the
D
half.
close to the end zone from the
Isaiah
Empire.
Bryant
They've really been able to
goes
tighten the screws down there near the end zone and come up with big blocks.
Yeah, number 16, Mike Dross, came off of his player to make that D. A little poachy, but got the job done.
Izzy Bryant swings the disc over, but can't connect with Nicholas Dacey. And the disc now with Rochester, and they'll have a chance to punch it in easy here and get back on track in this game. Zach Smith brings the disc to the line. And just can't find.
Rochester score.
Empire can't come up with it. David Ferraro makes a nice cut to the break side. Zach Smith puts it around. And big plays from their big guys there.
Well, now we get to see the Empire offense for the first time in a while.
They've been sitting on the sideline getting cold, and I wonder if that could be effect on this game right now.
Well, you just saw a lot of them throw off their sweatsuits. You know.
Yeah.
We're sitting over here, and it's getting chilly now that the sun's gone down.
It's 7-4 New York in the waning minutes of the second quarter. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire versus the Rochester Dragons. If you're just joining us, wind has been a factor in this game. We've watched as both teams have struggled to come upwind until just recently when the Empire put in 2 upwind scores off of miscues from the Rochester team, including one where they thought that the ref was a player on their team and tried to swing it over. And you think about it, you're not used to seeing somebody wearing similar colors to you on the field with you when you're playing in USA Ultimate.
Absolutely, and it's funny because in Ultimate we usually run whites and darks, and the referee's both.
The referee is both. And Empire coming back down the field. Here's Joseph Ouellette with the disc. Punches it into the middle of the field, Seth Canetti. Canetti, of course, played in the AUDL last year, and he puts one up to Hussein Carnegie. That's just asking Carnegie to make a play, and he can't make that play.
He almost did, though.
makes it.
He almost
1
did.
minute left.
Carnegie goes for it, and he's down. He's down.
Carnegie a little slow to get up.
We may have a injury. Carnegie has been plagued by ankle and hamstring injuries, although this looks like it might be his shoulder.
Well, the guy who plays the style of Ultimate that Carnegie does, you know, he's bound to have some injuries. Hopefully this is just, you know, a tweak, which somebody who hits the ground as much as he does is prone to get. And it looks like he's walking it off.
He's going to take it. He's going to come off the field. May have just landed on his shoulder wrong when he laid out for that disc.
The shoulder injury, it's a scary thing, even just mentally. If, you know, guy lands on your shoulder, you want to know that you're sound before you get back into the game.
And now Rochester with an opportunity here.
Well, you
Izzy
see,
Bryant comes into the game for Hussein Carnegie.
You see they put in a D player in this opportunity.
Right. And here comes Rochester up the field. Got a double team early on number 6, Skylar Brunner. And another turnover. And the double team has been so effective for New York. Here's Bryant swinging the disc into the middle of the field here for CJ Ouellette. Now Jack Marsh on the far side. We look down the field.
30 seconds left.
We've got 30 seconds left in the second quarter. And the Empire punch it in. That's a huge score right there with 30 seconds to go. I think the clock is now just going to run out on this quarter.
Great half for the Empire.
The Empire lead this game 8-4.
New York Empire.
And you can see the Dragons want to get to the line as soon as possible. They want another shot at the end zone going downwind before they go into half down 4.
Absolutely.
26 seconds left.
We need to see exactly what's going to happen here with the clock. And clock management becomes a real issue. Of course, a disc in the air can still be caught and scored. even as time expires.
Well, we saw that on ESPN last year.
Yes, we did. Playing for the AUDL, the Alley Cats put up a huge huck with just seconds left on the clock, and as the disc was flying through the air, the clock expired, and Brody Smith made a spectacular play to come down with the disc, and he made it onto SportsCenter in their top 10 plays of the day, and it absolutely deserved it, let me tell you that.
It was a great catch.
And here we go. With about 25 seconds left in the quarter, Rochester will have to work quickly to get one in before the half, and they'll want it. Sitting down 8-4, they need a score. Here's Steven Glouser with the disc. He swings it over to Zach Smith on the sideline. Zach Smith punches it into the center of the field. Joe Becker with the disc here. And Becker puts it up deep. Is he going to stay in bounds? Oh, but he cannot make the play. It's in and out of his hands. And that has been the way the game has gone so far for Rochester. Just unable to make the plays when it counts. As this first half comes to a close, you have the New York Empire leading the Rochester Dragons 8-4. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the Empire in the AUDL, their season opener here in Manhattan. And what are we seeing here in the first half, Wes, that both teams should be looking for going into the second half?
Well, we've seen already, we talked about whether or not they were going to be using the zone. And we've seen already that the Empire has been very effective using the double team, especially when Rochester is moving upwind. They've gotten some immediate turns off of the double team because the Rochester handlers just haven't been able to get the disc off the sideline. We've seen time after time the big swing just not even getting outside of the cup.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see what's going to happen here with Rochester. I mean, they clearly need to make some adjustments. I think they just need to throw a little bit on the sideline and try to get the jitters out. They've just had some drops and some miscues on throws that they need to clean up. And it's 8-4 here at halftime. New York Empire leading the Rochester Dragons.
The play is still going on, Charlie. There was a foul called. They reset the stack, and Rochester punches it in.
The announcer here in the stadium had called the game coming to an end the first half, but you're absolutely right. A foul call reset the disc, and Rochester just scored.
Score is still 8-5. New York.
And now it's 8-5. Well, that was an interesting turn of events.
Interesting turn of events, and now
the referee's talking it out in the middle of the field. It's unclear exactly what happened there, and without a microphone system for the referees to communicate what's going on in the field, sometimes it's a little bit hard to know what's happening.
Well, I can make a bet with you right now. With the few seconds left in the game, the Empire is going to receive the pull going downwind, and Hussein Carnegie is going to be looking to go to the end zone.
Yeah, I think
they're going to have to put it right away.
They don't have much time left. There are just seconds to go in the first half, and I think there's really only one strategy. Maybe swing it into the center of the field to your best thrower, that might be Jack Marsh, and let him just put it to the end zone. And run a couple guys down there. I mean, Rochester's going to know what to expect here.
Absolutely.
But the fact of the matter is, Hussein Carnegie, with 3 defenders on him, could still come down with the disc.
This is one of the unique things to Professional Ultimate. We're going to see a play a lot like we see at the end of NFL games, where there's a Hail Mary pass, and sometimes defenses will put out wide receivers just to go knock down the ball in the end zone. Rochester has to know that this is the same situation.
And we see some big height out there for the Rochester line. David Ferraro out there. And you wonder, are they going to try to put this pull out of bounds, maybe try to set up their defense, or are they going to try to just run it straight off the pull?
They're going for it.
And we see that they're leaving some guys hanging back. 2 tall players. They're basically running a cover like you would see in the NFL. And here's Jack Marsh, just as we thought, puts up the disc. Everybody heading underneath. Everybody trying to get to it. And number 17 comes down with it in the back of the end zone. That's Matthew Stevens with the score. And the Empire get one before the half runs out.
What an
It's
exciting
9-5, and everybody misread that disc, and the guy trailing the play ended up with it.
Somebody's got to be there to pick up the garbage.
Somebody's got to be there to pick up the garbage. And it is 9-5 here in New York City. Your Empire lead the Rochester Dragons. And we'll be back in the second half with some analysis. We'll be back with you shortly. Enjoy halftime. And we're back here in New York City for the New York Empire versus the Rochester Dragons. This is Ultiworld's coverage of the American Ultimate Disc League here in New York City. We're in Manhattan at Randall's Island, where the Empire lead the Rochester 9-5. And we're going to update you quickly on some scores from around the league. First up, we've got Madison up 4-2 on Chicago, and sort of an interesting result there early in the game, with Madison missing most of their D-line because their college players out for the series. And Chicago is certainly considered the top team in the league. They had a huge win last week.
Definitely not what you expect to see early on in that game.
Toronto took down the Breeze 30-13 in an absolute blowout earlier today.
That's about what you expected in that game.
Other games underway, Indianapolis and Minnesota. No scores reported from that game yet, but we'll take a look on Twitter and keep you up to date on that game. Let's talk about some keys to the second half here, Wes.
Well, before we even get to that, let's talk about why the score is what it is, because we saw the first half end with craziness.
It was a crazy finish. So we watched as Rochester went down, turned it over apparently, and time running out apparently. However,
it was announced in the stadium that the half had ended.
What happened was that there was a foul, which puts 10 seconds back onto the clock to discourage intentional fouling late in the game. And Rochester then punched it in, leaving about 8 seconds on the clock. New York receives the pull, swings it over to Jack Marsh, who puts it up into a crowd of about 10 people, and the disc floats over everybody except the one guy trailing the play, who catches it in the back of the end zone to get that last second score for New York to put them up 9-5. And that's a big play, considering that this game it's been difficult to get scores, low scoring.
Oh, absolutely. And it was a great play for the home team to get that going into half, because the stadium frankly erupted because it was such an exciting play. They thought that the Dragons had come back and closed the gap a little bit right before half, but as luck would have it, the 8 seconds left were enough for the Empire to punch one more in.
And Hussein Carnegie, leading player on the Empire with 3 goals and an assist. And we're underway here in the second half as Rochester puts it up. New York leads the Dragons 9-5. And a little miscommunication here at the start as they swing the disc into the middle of the field for Goose Santussis. And a huge block! But Hussein Carnegie makes the layout catch to keep possession for the Empire, who then promptly throws it away. Conservation of greatness, folks. It is a reality in Ultimate. And now that Rochester has a real chance here to get an early upwind score. This could be big if they punch it in and get a little early momentum in the second half.
Well, Charlie, you were talking about the keys to the second half.
And here's the disc going up into the end zone. But a simple block.
For Rochester, it has to be an upwind break. They have not been able to punch one in upwind. They have squandered a few very good opportunities going that direction, and they're not going to be able to close the gap if New York continues to score downwind.
Heavy contact there, and that's finally whistled.
Not a lot of whistles in this game.
Yeah, no, the refs have been letting them play. It's 9-5 New York. Here's number 3 with the disc, and he puts it deep to Hussein Carnegie, who's got separation and easily comes down with the disc. Not in the end zone, however. He's going to be just outside, 1 yard out, looking, pivoting. Nobody available. Still nobody available. Stall count getting a little high there, maybe. Swings the disc into the middle of the field for CJ Lett. Disc now on the far sideline. Matthew Stevens comes back to the middle for Brandon Auerbach, who punches it in and finds Hussein Carnegie with another layup, and he is having the game of his life out here, folks.
Unbelievable point to start the second half
and
for Carnegie.
Anybody who didn't put him on their fantasy rosters has got to be hitting themselves right now, because he is tearing it up. That's his 4th goal of the game. He's got an assist, he's got some Ds, and he's just doing everything for this Empire team right now.
He really is. It's hard to even put into words the impact that he's having on this game.
And always humble, comes to the sideline, grabs his water bottle, no big fanfare. And you know what? Actually, the play he made there was nice, but the play that he made down on this far sideline was even bigger, because he kept Rochester from having the disc from about 10 yards out with a transition offensive attack ready to punch it in. And although he turned it over 20 yards further down the field, which makes a huge difference right now.
Well, and Rochester had made a big play to get that D. You know, the defender who got his hand on that had to have been thinking, oh, I just gave my team great field position. But no, Hussein Carnegie just takes it right away from him.
And that's what big players do. The score is 10-5 New York. For those of you upset that we don't have a scoreboard, we wish we could. The limitations of our live streaming system do not allow us to have a scoreboard, but we'll keep you updated like we would on the radio with scores. We'll do better in the second half. It's 10-5 right now. And that's big because, you know, really Rochester could have shaved this lead to 3, but now they're looking at another downwind point and probably have to feel a little bit discouraged. That pulls up about half field, lands inbounds.
Immediate double team.
Immediate double team. It's worked for them earlier. Big hammer across the field and just doesn't attack the disc.
The double team does exactly what it's intended to, forces a bad throw.
And, you know, I don't even know that throw was so bad. It just didn't get attacked. Here's Izzy Bryant with the disc. Nice play there. Coming around, number 32, Elliot Bemis with the disc. Swings it back to the middle to Lou Wang. He's had a great game. Quietly swings the disc all the way across the field to number 11, Alan Brown. Back to Wang. He's looking, waiting, starting to develop. A little flip over the top to Izzy. Bryant with the disc. Holding. Looking back to Lou Wang across. Oh, floaty disc. Did that get eaten? No. Empire player comes down with it.
Picks up the garbage.
That's number 2, Matthew Lamar, who punches it in. And this game's turning into a blowout, folks. It's 11-5.
It's getting crazy. Rochester really needed to come out in this half and put some discs in upwind, and the Empire have done exactly what the Dragons needed to do.
There's just been a lack of urgency from the Rochester side. They haven't attacked the disc. They've just kind of had some unfortunate drops. I mean, you see on this hammer over the top, maybe not the perfect throw, but I think a throw that should have been caught.
Well, it was a great throw in itself, but you know that's what the double team is meant for, to force the issue and have one of those throws that, you know, in all reality is a lower percentage throw than a simple swing.
And that's often the difference maker in Ultimate. And people don't think about it in those terms so often, but that, you know, the around backhand with just a single mark, probably about a 95% throw. That hammer,
guys, yeah,
that
absolutely.
hammer, maybe only an 85% throw, 80% throw, maybe even less in this wind, and that's going to make a difference over the course of a game.
And what you really don't want to do is, you know, force your teammate to make a play on a swing pass.
It's 11-5 New York. And here comes the Rochester looking for their first upwind score whatsoever. Whether they get a break or just an offensive point, I don't think it matters at this point. They need something going that direction to get a little bit of confidence in their ability to move that way.
Oh, you go this long in the game without breaking upwind, it has to be weighing on their shoulders.
A nice little no-look pass there. John Bain on this close sideline, and another drop.
Unforced error.
An unforced error, and it's been killing Rochester all night. And now the Empire can put this game away with a score right now.
This is absolutely not where
Lou Wang
the
with the
Dragons
disc.
wanted to do
He
this.
can do really great stuff with the disc near the end zone. We've seen it earlier tonight with a little backhand break. And look at him float this one up over the top to number 10. And that's Izzy Bryant, and he pulls it down for the score. Just creative work with the disc there by Lou Wang, and the score is 12-5 New York.
Well, that is Lou trusting his receiver right there, because he put it up into the air for both of the guys to go after, and his man came down with it like he knew he would.
With an explosive player like Izzy Bryant, who came up in the Columbia University system and was their star player for years, with a player as explosive as him, putting a disc up like that isn't a bad idea. It's like throwing the ball to LeBron James at the rim. A lot of the time, he's just going to come down with it.
Right, well, all these guys have skill, right? You know, and I think as we progress in this professional Ultimate thing, that the guys with the athleticism to go with the skill are going to be the ones that come out and shine. We've already seen Hussein Carnegie come out and take this game over by making athletic play after athletic play. Now we see it from Izzy Bryant.
And New York up 12-5. This game all but out of reach for Rochester at this point. They've got to get something going. they look to do anything here. And the Empire have really hit their stride here over the past 5 or 6 points, really making it happen and making it very difficult for Rochester to make things move. Across the league, we see that the Indy Alley Cats trailing the Minnesota Wind Chill 17-12 with a minute and a half to go in the first half. And we're back to the action here in New York. Rochester with the disc looking downwind, and there's a big huck. Wow. David Ferraro chasing that down, and he's going to bid. Oh, but he just can't quite come down with it. What a play from David Ferraro. If he had come up with that, it would have been the play of the game, and that could have made SportsCenter.
Oh, absolutely, and that would have been a game changer for the Dragons, who just not have been able to get anything going yet.
They just need a little something. They need a spark like that. But now back with the Empire, and here they come. Lu Wang with the disc. He's got 2 assists tonight, having a very good game.
I'll tell you what, the Dragons can't afford to give up another upwind point.
And I'm surprised we're not seeing more defensive looks from the Dragons, who have just been struggling to get things moving. Lu Wang with the disc on the sideline.
The Empire's been so successful with the double team down there. You would think that the Dragons would follow suit.
And a big rip from Rochester to the far side of the field. And a very nice throw and a catch for the score. It's 12-6. Rochester making a very nice play there off the sideline, and it shows you the width of this field. If you watch that throw, when it went out of his hand, I thought that disc's out of bounds on the far side, but on a USA Ultimate field, it probably would have been.
Great pitch and catch right there. That's all it was.
Absolutely right. The question is, what can they do to get some momentum heading in this direction?
I'm sure that is the same thing that they are asking themselves and that their coaches are asking, because they have been stifled going this direction all night. Unfortunately for them, if you look at the flags, the wind is picking up as they're about to receive the pull to go upwind, so they get to combat with that. Their O-line has been on the field a lot of points this game because the Empire have scored so many times. They have to start feeling some fatigue at some point. And some frustration for not being able to string together enough passes to make it all the way upwind.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. This is a big point in the game. I mean, certainly there's only so much they can do at this point, but scores, even if it's heading into next week, some confidence will be important. Here's Hussein Carnegie with the disc. Flips it over to Goose Santussis. And here's Canetti cutting. Can't shake his defender. And there's a call. A stall call. And it picks it up, jacks it to the end zone. This could be exactly what they need. Ferraro brings it down in the end zone. And that is exactly what the doctor ordered for the Rochester Dragons. David Ferraro playing very well here in the second half.
Absolutely. Came out with something to prove, it looks like. Made the huge bid going downwind. Now gets the Dragons their first upwind point of the game. Hopefully we can see them string together a couple, make this one competitive.
It's 12-7. New York leads the Dragons, but now New York facing an upwind point, and this is a chance for Rochester to at least make this game interesting by getting a pair of breaks back here late in the game. I believe there was a stall called, but there may have also been an offensive foul call on that turnover. Around the league, Windy City Wildfire up 5-4 on the Madison Radicals.
They're making a quick comeback.
Yeah, and we'll keep an eye on that game. That's one of the more interesting games around the league this week. It's 12-7 here in New York. The Empire lead the Dragons. And the Dragons with their first downwind D point in a long time. This is going to be a chance for them to at least show us what they've got on their D-line. And of course, the Empire will probably look to take it a little more patiently this time going up the field and see what their offensive line can do.
Oh, absolutely, Charlie. The Empire really haven't struggled that much moving the disc upwind so far. This is going to be an interesting point for their O-line, who really haven't been on the field too much this game.
Got Canetti picking up the disc. He puts one up over his defender's head, and the 2 players from the Rochester Dragons come up making a play there. And they're going deep quickly here. And a big play out block. And it's caught, but it's caught, and they punch it in. That's another score for Rochester. Huge score for them. And another game-saving play, a possession-saving play, making the difference on the point.
Is this a game now? Are we watching a comeback happen?
Well, we got a long way to go before I think we can call it a comeback.
We're going to have to see the Dragons score
It's
another one upwind.
12-8. New York leads. And another pair of breaks would be big for Rochester, but I think that the Empire offensive line is probably ready to get back out there and just put one down.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Empire handles this point going downwind. They've had a lot of success with the double team down in the downwind end zone. I wouldn't be surprised to see a little Huck and Z maybe.
Potentially, I mean, that certainly has caused Rochester a lot of trouble. And the last point where they scored upwind was caused by somewhat of a short field. They didn't work it all the way down, and that's what the Empire want to avoid, is giving them an opportunity to get an easy one by turning it over close. Here we go. Goose Santos with the disc in the middle of the field. He puts it up, a nice snag there.
Holding on.
And he gets hacked on the mark, but there's no call from the referee. There's no call. Everybody's looking around thinking that there should be a call, and in fact, a late call from the referee.
Other side of the field.
Very late call. The far side referee making the... And here we go, number 3, CJ Lett advancing the disc down the field a little bit.
CJ moving up with the disc.
And we're seeing a little bit of, he gets bumped, but there's no call there either. Nice D there from David Ferraro, and they put it up to him again. 2 defenders on him. Hussein Carney, catch up! And everybody just misses that one, just out of reach. And that's a great matchup that I hope we see more of. David Ferraro and Hussein Carnegie laying out in unison.
Finally, those two guys going after each other.
It's a matchup that we would be hoping to see this whole game. The Empire back with the disc. Comes around to the far sideline. Here's CJ with the disc. Up to Jack Marsh.
Jack Marsh with the disc. Steven Glauser aggressive.
A lot of contact on the mark, but they're not calling anything right now. Centering the disc to CJ. Loose mark here, trying to stop the Huck maybe. Down to Seth Canetti. Canetti, of course, with AUDL experience last year. And he turns it over again. He looks like a hand block. I believe that was a block. And he's now got back-to-back turnovers, hurting the team a little bit here.
6 minutes left in the quarter.
6 minutes left in the third quarter. And here comes Rochester. They're looking for something to get moving. John Bain with the disc. He moves it up the field. This is TJ Burns with the disc, having a big game. Number 20, Joe Becker, swings it around all the way across. Glauser in the middle of the field. Gets open. Holding the disc. Stagnant, cutting downfield. But they find an open TJ Burns. And TJ Burns takes a timeout. I think that's a wise decision, just about 15, 20 yards outside the end zone.
Certainly helps both sides because they've gone back and forth a few times now, getting late in the game. One thing I'm thinking about is for the Empire, how long until they start thinking about the clock? Because, in a timed game like this, possession is going to be key. It's like the end of an NBA game. You're not going to want to take shots or have turnovers before you've used enough time. They don't want to give the Dragons a chance to catch up.
I think they should consider just trying to score right now. I think there's too much time left. We've got about 5.5 minutes to go here in the third. New York leads the Dragons 12-8, but the Dragons now in a dangerous, in an attacking position, looking to score 3 straight points here, and really put themselves back in the game. That just moments ago it looked like this game was over.
It's becoming a game of runs, that's for sure. The Empire had a pretty sizable run at the end of the first half, beginning of the second. They came out and it looked like they were going to just put this one out of contention. But the Dragons, they've persevered and they're now on the comeback trail.
And here we go. Rochester picking up the disc and waiting for something to happen. Strike cut can't get open. Can he catch up with this disc? Not quite. And that's another turnover near the end zone for the Dragons, something that's been plaguing them all game.
Well, something that we've been seeing is that the Dragons have been a little bit better at the fast break offense going upwind than they have the sets. Their set plays are not connecting.
Lou Wang makes a nice catch here on the sideline, flips it into the middle of the field for Hussein Carnegie, and there's a call. Zach Smith on the mark. And unclear exactly what's happening, who the penalty is on.
Old habits die hard. We still have players shouting for calls.
A travel potentially on the catch, which is not a turnover. You only get a turnover if your travel happens after you've set your pivot foot. And that's Izzy Bryant looking deep to Lou Wang. Zach Smith on defense, and Lou Wang with a perfect throw from Izzy Bryant puts one in for the New York Empire, and it is 13-6.
That was a pretty throw, Charlie. Sometimes your receiver has to make a big play, and sometimes your thrower just lays it in the breadbasket for him.
And that's one of the most dangerous cuts in the game. You're a handler, you dump the disc to somebody else, and then you just take off to the end zone. You only need about 2 steps, and you're past your guy. Lou Wang looking good on that play, but you know what? A better throw from Izzy Bryant.
Unbelievable throw. Just in this wind to make a perfect throw that never gets above 10 feet off the ground. It's one of the more difficult things that we have in our sport.
Still a lot of time left here in New York City, but
the Empire has to be feeling a little bit more secure after tacking on another one, ending that run by the Dragons.
Definitely an important score.
When you're attacking, going on offense downwind, it's a must score point, and they got the job done there.
Here comes the pull. Very nice pull all the way down the field. Rolls over to the Rochester side. Here's number 9, John Bain with the disc. Gets it back into the middle.
Seen a little zone again.
Zach Smith on the far side. And a scooter over the top gets eaten up by Izzy Bryant. And that's the throws that the Empire has been looking for. Those over-the-top throws have been turnovers most of the time for Rochester. And here comes New York with another chance to really end this game.
Yeah, those low percentage throws that the zone has been forcing have really been killing the Dragons.
Page with the lefty throw to Izzy Bryant, who gets hacked with the and one.
Is there an and one in Ultimate? I don't know.
And there's referees getting involved. Izzy wants that to be a completion. But he's saying, referee says no. Izzy, showing his experience there, tapping the disc in before his defender is ready after taking the penalty yardage. And he's going to throw it into the end zone, and that's a score for New York. The big old spike. And this game, it's 14.
Rochester Dragons 8.
And the Rochester has 8 with a 6-point lead with just a couple minutes to go here in the third quarter. Things looking good for the New York Empire.
Yeah, it looked like the Dragons were really trying to make this a game for a little bit, but with 2 scores in a row, especially with one going upwind, the Empire is shutting them down at home and showing them that they're going to use the home field advantage.
And you have to think that maybe New York just got a little complacent, had a couple turnovers, and gave up a couple scores there, but really they look like the better team out here.
You can't score every point, Charlie.
That's right. And their athletes have just been explosive. We've got 3 minutes to go here in the third quarter. Score, New York 14, Rochester 8. And getting set here on the line. Defense talking it over on the line. That's Philip Kay talking things out with his team. Tallest player out on that line. And Rochester waiting for the pull. Zach Smith on the line again. Disc coming down. Looks like that's going to just land inbounds.
It looked like it was out, but we're used to the smaller fields.
And there's a big rip upwind. Oh, this disc is still available for a catch, and he just cannot come down with it. Rochester again with an opportunity, and there's an injury on the field, and he looks like he is really in pain. Hard to say from here whether that's a cramp or if he pulled a muscle. We have to hope he's doing okay. Crowd quiet here as they watch this player. We've seen a few injuries tonight.
Yeah, guys early on in the season, they're not going to be quite at peak physical condition yet, especially since the club season is a few months in the rearview mirror. Injuries happen early on. It's like when the NFL starts training camp, there's always a few guys that get hurt just breaking the rust off.
Izzy stands up. He's going to take one, but he looks like he's okay. May have just been a cramp, just maybe Charlie horse some kinds.
Just like we talked about earlier about Hussein Carnegie, Izzy plays a physical game. He's hitting the ground a lot, and those types of players end up with the bumps and bruises that take a few seconds to walk off, but generally they're going to be able to rebound.
New York 14, Rochester 8. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire, the American Ultimate Disc League. It's under the lights here in Manhattan on Randall's Island. Yardage penalty goes to Rochester. Referees having a conversation here. And discs back in. Rochester looking for this upwind score. This would be big for them, which would give them a chance to get a downwind break after this point. Number 24, Zach Smith with the disc. Comes around the field to number 2, who just gets it in past the diving defender. That's TJ Burns in the back of the end zone, scoring that disc, and it's now 14-9.
One nice thing for the Dragons, they've come out in the second half and being able to punch a couple in upwind. It's not really affecting the outcome of this game right now, but they have to be happy to be making strides in the right direction, using this almost as practice towards the end.
Regardless of what happens in this game, for both teams, this is really somewhat of a warm-up, right? Obviously, you want to come away with the W, but it's a long season. Right? 8 home games and 8 on the road. There's plenty of time to get wins. Right now, more important than anything is starting to figure out which lineups play well together, and who's really going to be your big stars. There's a lot of we've seen last season in the AUDL. Some players rise up.
Oh yeah,
that we haven't seen before.
Ultimate players are fairly used to having a long preseason, so to say, at this point. Teams go to a number of tournaments before they're expected to perform at their peak levels, and this could certainly be the teams just getting used to one another, getting used to the new rules, and getting back into shape.
And here we go, Empire coming back up the field, and there's a big disc floating. Lots of players underneath. We've seen it work before for the Empire, and it works again. Number 17 comes down with it. That's Matthew Stevens.
17 again.
And he has been trailing the play better than anybody, letting Hussein Carnegie draw a lot of defenders, and the Empire punch it in with the throw spike.
We might have to start calling Matthew Stevens the trash man, because he is coming down with every one of them.
15-9.
15-9.
The Empire made it look easy on that upwind point. And with just a couple minutes to go here in the third quarter, starting to look a little bleak for Rochester.
It'll be interesting to see whether or not the Empire continues to roll their top lines, or if they start diversifying the play time, getting some of the other D guys out on the field now that the score is not very close.
That was Jack Marsh with the big backhand huck right there, and what's big about that is even if you turn that disc over, you're still forcing Rochester to go the whole way down the field. And so when you do come down with it like this, even on a trailing play like that by Stevens, now you're in a strong position to get an easy score, and that's just so important. And it shows, Marsh's veteran leadership there. He's been playing for a long time, and coming up in some of the best systems in the country at Wisconsin.
It's interesting you say that about veteran leadership, because Rochester, without their coach, without the top end guys like Jack Marsh, maybe they just don't have that experience to make these adjustments that we're seeing the Empire make. Like right now, they're on the double team.
Yes, Empire back in the double team, another disc floating up into the sky, and there's a D from Mike Drost, and they're going to attack quickly in transition over to number 11, Alan Brown, and now Rochester sets their D, but just a few yards away, will it be two? Number 13, Nicholas Dacey has the disc, swings it into the middle. That's Bryant, who throws a big inside-out flick, but can't connect. Rochester now has the disc heading back upfield.
You have to expect that we're going to see the double team again. It's been so effective down here.
And it looks like we will. One guy stopping the swing, one guy stopping the upfield throw. And with the referees allowing so much contact, the double team makes more sense than ever. And there's a simple drop, unforced error by Zach Smith. 1 minute to go here in the third quarter. Mike Drost has the disc, swinging it around the sideline, but can't connect with his receiver on the far side. Will Sloan picks the disc up for Rochester. And here comes Rochester. They would sure like to get a score in before the end of the third quarter here. Time ticking down. About 45 seconds to go in the quarter. Will Sloan. Nice layout catch there.
Out of bounds.
But either that disc was down or it was out of bounds, and it's Empire disc. 40 seconds to go here in the third. And a big huck up from Izzy Bryant. That's going to float and gets blocked, but does it get cleaned up? Not quite. Here comes Rochester. Time ticking down. We may see a Hail Mary at the end of this one. Another over the top gets D'd by the Empire. And here they go. 4 seconds to go. And they score just before the quarter. A big time score. It's 16-9. And the Empire now in total control of this one.
2 buzzer beaters. They're really, not only are they in control, but they're doing it in a dramatic fashion at certain points.
And with the quarter drawing to a close, we'll have to see if Rochester can get things moving here. I believe we do have at least one more pull before this quarter comes to a complete end, so Rochester will have a chance if they can get somebody sprinting down the field to at least make a play in the end zone.
This is going to give Rochester a chance to do what the Empire did at the end of the first half. Hopefully they get it to the center of the field to a strong thrower and, you know, put the disc in the air before the clock winds down. Hopefully somebody can come up with it like the Empire were able to do.
And Empire getting set to pull here. Pull comes up.
2 seconds left.
And Rochester getting ready to at least put this disc up. Notice they're not picking it up yet, not touching the disc. Much like basketball, the clock doesn't start until you touch the disc. Not sure what's happening.
Confusion on who will pick up the disc.
Kevin Quinlan has to take the disc from the sideline. Takes it in, puts up a giant hammer. Anybody's disc right now, tipped, and they can't come up with it. The end of the quarter. It's 16 Empire, 9 Rochester, and Empire pretty much in control of this game. It would be tough for them to lose it at this point.
Yeah, you'd have to expect that the Empire feel pretty good about the lead that they've built. The Dragons were able to make a little bit of a run midway through that third quarter. You know, probably scared the Empire a little bit, but as it turned out, the score is now to the point you have to expect the Empire are going to take this one handedly. The fourth quarter will be interesting to see how the lines shake out. A lot of guys haven't gotten a ton of playing time. We've seen them the Empire at least roll 2 pretty steady top lines. But you know, you can see players like Hussein Carnegie putting on their tracksuits. I would expect that guys like that are not going to be getting the playing time at the end, try to keep them from getting injured and get some younger guys some experience.
Yeah, considering the tweaks we've seen from 2 of the Empire's top guys, Carnegie and Izzy Bryant over on the far sideline, you know, maybe we won't see them much more in this game.
Well, you don't need those athletic plays right now.
At this point, you kind of just want to score your offensive points downwind, play hard D, but you know, don't take risks. You know, you talk about this a lot at tournaments, and of course, this is such a different style of play than you're going to see at a tournament. Because with a week off after your game, there's no reason to leave anything in the tank.
Right.
But at the same time, you don't want to end up with an injury that ends up nagging you for the rest of the season. You know, Carnegie played 3 or 4 games for the Connecticut Constitution last season before he went down with an injury and missed the rest of the year. But you know, all in all, New York Empire, a great start to their season and their first game ever in the AUDL.
They have to be happy with the way that this one's folded out in front of the home crowd. You know, they put on quite a show in not necessarily adverse conditions, but the wind hasn't been, you know, the easiest for an ultimate game. And yeah, you know, you can't be upset with the way that things have panned out so far for the Empire.
As they get set back out here on the line, you know, one of the things we haven't talked too much about in this game is the impact of the referees. You know, I would say that we haven't really noticed them so much, except that there's been very physical play that hasn't been policed very much.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things we're going to, see players adjust to is who are your refs, how do they let you play, and that's going to change the complexion of a game a lot of the time.
Well, it's very clear a lot of times that the players are still getting used to the rules and to having the referees because they many times react as if, they expect a call. In a player-officiated sport, there are going to be calls in certain situations more often than when their referees are there because the referees just don't have enough eyes to see everything. So the players, they've stopped playing a little bit or, noticeably turned their heads when they think that calls are about to be made, and the referees have really been letting them play. So, they're going to have to kind of learn the distinctions along the way, but so far the referees, I think, have done a pretty bang-up job of keeping it even, keeping the game from getting chippy.
It's 16-9 here in the New York as we get set to start the fourth quarter, and the disc is up. A pull about to half field as we've seen all night, rolling down the field. And here's Zach Smith picking up the disc, swings the disc over to Will Sloan, who's been a steady handler for Rochester this whole game. Smith back to Sloan. A lot of stagnant cutting downfield, and the double team now getting some traction. Disc over to number 20, Joe Becker. Smith in the middle, over to the far sideline. Disc comes back to Smith. Now with Steve Calabrese in the close sideline here, back to Sloan. Sloan holding, finds Zach Smith, and Smith puts it up to the end zone. Some separation there, and he's in. That's a score. Rochester puts it in, and it's 16-10.
Score.
Empire
28, TJ Burns.
Still have a 6-point lead here, but a nice possession. In fact, the cleanest possession I think we've seen for Rochester so far this game.
The Dragons have to be happy with that point. At this point, they're playing for pride, and they put together a number of very nice passes, held onto the disc pretty well. Were able to combat the Empire's double team on one of the rare occasions so far tonight, and worked it down the field for a score like they're working without wind.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that I think Rochester's going to be looking for towards the end of this game is just getting some quality possessions under their belts with no turnovers. I think that's one of the first times in this game we've seen them have an entire point with no turns, and that's really important in this high-level professional game where the other team is going to be able to quickly take advantage of your turns.
Absolutely. And these teams, they don't get a ton of opportunities to play in these conditions with these rules. So, every point they're using it to, learn as much as possible, progress, and figure out how they're going to, win games later on this year.
Jack Marsh throws it into the middle of the field to St. Carnegie, who's still in the game. Seth Canetti here on the far sideline. And we've got Goose with the disc here. A nice strike cut there. Oh, a little bit underthrown, but Canetti makes the play. He's looking. Carnegie waiting in the back of the end zone. Nice cut there. Back to Goose. Goose here on the close sideline. Up and in. Rochester defense looking weak. That's CJ Lett with the goal. It's 17-10. Your Empire looking good here and just answering very nicely the good point from Rochester moments ago.
I will say, Charlie, the Empire, they have some wheels on them. They've clearly been the faster team here tonight, and there have been plays where guys have just outrun their defenders or made Ds because they've outrun the receivers that you really don't want to see if you're the Dragons because it's hard to combat speed in this game. Speed is the king.
Speed is absolutely the king, and I think what we're seeing here a little bit is the defensive lines are starting to get a little bit tired, which is contributing to the offense moving down the field with greater success.
Oh, definitely. And, later on in a game like this, it's hard to kind of muster that energy to combat your fatigue when you're not really playing for much.
Just for some perspective, at the end of the first half in Indianapolis, the score was 19-13. So a much higher scoring game there you know, I think the wind has contributed to a lot of that, and just a lot of turnovers in this game. It's 17-10 New York. Here comes Rochester down the field. We've got Kevin Quinlan with the disc on the close sideline here, and Sloan, the rock in the middle there, gets around the field. Steve Calabrese on the far sideline. Back to Stephen Glouser. Sloan gets open here in the middle, gets looked off. Down the field, Glouser, wow, what a play from Zach Smith. Big layout, and the score for Rochester, a nice chest-high grab from Zach Smith.
Great grab.
To put the score on the board for Rochester Dragons, and it's 17-11.
You know, that's the type of play the Dragons wanted in the first half, because that is something that certainly in Ultimate you can build some momentum off of.
A close game at the end of the second quarter in Chicago. The Wildfire tied up with Madison 8-8. A very interesting matchup, and you know, I think the Radicals have to feel good about that score right now because they're missing the majority of their defensive line.
The Radicals are certainly feeling good, and that's surprisingly low scoring, I think, for that game. You know, that's a game with a lot of high-end offensive talent.
It's very cold in the Midwest right now. Cold and windy, and that's going to translate to even lower scores than we see here. You know, with temperatures in the 30s, it's hard to get the disc in and out of your hands.
Absolutely.
It's in the 40s here, I think, maybe low 50s here in New York. It's 17-11. The New York Empire lead the Rochester Dragons. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the American Ultimate Disc League. And here come the New York Empire. Seth Kennedy with the disc, fakes the forehand, throws the backhand. Comes down here. Matthew Stevens with the disc. He's been cleaning up the trash all game. Gets the disc in to an in-cut from Brendan.
Number 8. Swings it to Seth Kennedy, number 6.
Kennedy around to the far side. Auerbach hits Matthew Stevens in the middle of the field. Back to Auerbach. Throws it over. Working the full width of the field right now. Nice work from the Empire. A big swing all the way across. The handlers for the Empire looking great right now. Goose with the disc. Gets it around to Kennedy on the close sideline. Looking for somebody to cut into that corner of the end zone. Not finding it. Oh, and the defensive just falls off with a fake little turnaround. Gimme right there in the corner. A nice move, but you can't, as a defender, you just can't let that one off.
Well, the receiver got his defender to turn around. As soon as he took his eyes off him, the receiver cut back and wide open for that catch in the end zone.
18-11. The Empire in complete control, as we expected, content to just score downwind and keep things moving right now.
I will say, Charlie, that was one of the first points of the game where we saw the offense move the disc truly from sideline to sideline on these wide fields.
And you can see the effectiveness. It's just so hard to play defense when the disc is moving so far, and you don't even have to make a cut. You can sort of fade off to the far sideline and just get a big swing all the way around. The throw doesn't even have to be that accurate because there's just so much room for you to run onto it.
It's really rough if you're playing defense for a long time covering those swings to be able to stay with your man. You know, it's tough to follow somebody for the width of a field like this for that long.
18-11 here in New York. Rochester looking to get another big play from Zach Smith, and that disc floats high, and nobody can get to it. Lu Wang picks the disc up, and here comes the Empire defensive line on offense. Jack Marsh with the disc, playing a little D. Jack Marsh swings the disc across the field, and there we see, with all that room, a nice play by the Rochester defender, but it's not enough. There's just enough space for the offensive player to get open. Number 11 punches it into Jack Marsh in the end zone. Alan Brown with the assist. There appears to be a call, some sort of stoppage. Jack Marsh not happy with the call. Flicks the disc back over to Brown.
In most Ultimate games, there's not a guy that wide open if there's not a call.
Brown checks it in, finds Lu Wang in the middle of the end zone. The field. But the disc is coming back. Players were not properly set before the disc was tapped in. Oh, a penalty on number 11, 5 yards coming back. And checks it in, and here we go. Izzy Bryant, nice cut up the strike side. Oh, that disc floats, and Rochester comes away with the D. And here's a chance for them to get one. Going back down the field on offense here. Zach Smith in the middle. A little bit of a flash double team there. Not a full set, but popping over early in the stall count. Try to slow them down. Disc coming in here to Joe Becker. Defense a little behind their guys right now. And then a drop here from Rochester. Another unforced error. And that's got to be their 5th or 6th of the game, just like that. Jack Marsh picks up the disc.
22 picks up Jack Marsh.
Flips it over.
Hometown favorite.
And into the end zone on the transition score. And that's a defensive score. That's a break for New York, and it's 19-11. With about 7 minutes to go here in the 4th quarter.
Well, the points are really piling on at this point, Charlie. And if you look over at the flagpoles, the wind has really died down. You know, that matched with the fatigue of the defensive players, we could see the scores being run up on both sides here at the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a combination of fatigue by the defense and the less reduced wind is really making it easier for the offensive flow to get going, which honestly is nice. After a relatively ugly first half of drops and turnovers, we've seen a little bit less of that here in the second.
Yeah, the game really has cleaned up. Both teams are, a little, clearly getting their legs under them, getting a little more comfortable with each other, and it's turned into some pretty ultimate here at the end.
And Empire pulling here. Jack Marsh with a big pull downwind.
And the pull.
It's floating up, picking up nicely. That's a very nice pull. Not all the way down the field, but gives time for the defense to get set.
Another double team trying to force the hard throw.
It's been very effective so far. That's David Ferraro in the middle of the field. Over here to the sideline to Sean Donnellan. Now they're working up a little bit. Swings back across, that's Maxwell Rick, number 12. Number 4 in the middle, David Ferraro. Around here to Donnellan. Nice grab there by Dan McCune. Back to Donnellan. A big hammer, but that's sitting up. But no defenders in the area. And Rochester comes down with it.
Putting them at 12.
Evan Megarello, and it's 19-12.
That's certainly not a throw we would have seen during the first half, Charlie.
Absolutely not. That would have gotten eaten alive by the wind. But a nice throw to the far side. With all that space over there, you don't even have to make a perfect throw. Just got to get it over there and let your guy come down with it.
Especially when there's not a defender in the area code.
Empire defensive line looking a little annoyed after that one. And that's a sign of a good defense. Go out and get a break and not be satisfied with letting the offense score on the following point.
That's the mentality you have to have if you're a D player. You don't want to get one break, you want to get all of the breaks. And that's certainly what the Empire seems to be saying right now. They're not happy with themselves, even though they clearly have this game wrapped up. They want to run the score up, and that's the kind of mentality that it takes to win any sort of sport.
Around the league, it's now halftime in Chicago. The game tied at 9-9, and Madison dropped a Hail Mary at the end of the half that would have put them up a score heading into the second half. But it's 19-12 here in New York City. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire and the American Ultimate Disc League. And yeah, another floating pull. It's certainly advantageous in that direction. And here we go. And we're underway here. The Empire putting it up deep. But there's a lot of defenders under this one, and they're going to get the D. Although an Empire player almost came up with it on the far side. That was Seth Canetti. And good transition defense by the Empire O-line. Here go the Rochester Dragons down the field. Looking off, open throw there. Number 12 here on the sideline, that's Maxwell Rick. And he's ripping a big one down the field, but there's just nothing but Empire players down on that far side. And Marsh comes up with the easy D, knocks it down so that he can take his time, bring it up to the line. And here's Canetti on the close sideline. Hussein Carnegie, a little contact, gets open but gets looked off. And Carnegie working in the back of the stack. And a little overthrow there, giving the disc back to Rochester. It's 19-12 New York. About 6.5 minutes to go here in the fourth quarter. Number 28, TJ Burns with the disc, gets it over to number 9, John Bain. And he flips it around the far side to a wide open cutter in the end zone. It's 19-13. And an opportunity there for the Empire, but a sloppy throw there gives it back to the Dragons.
Yeah, and we can already see, Charlie, with 5 minutes left in the game, the Empire have started opening their roster up a little bit. Coach Bell is talking to the players midway through the points. It's very active as they're coming off the field because, they have this one in hand and they're using this as a teaching tool. It's not a surprise that you see guys like Jack Marsh and Hussein Carnegie playing a lot of points, trying to, lead by example with the other young guys on their lines, and trying to make this as deep of a team as possible for later in the season.
This is just, frankly, this is not a huge challenge game for the New York. This is a game they're expected to win.
Right.
And they've got the Toronto Rush at home here in New York next week, and that's going to be a tough game.
That's what they're prepping for right now.
That's right, and the Rush absolutely dominated DC Breeze. The Rush with height and speed that outmatches New York, honestly, and that's going to be an interesting challenge. We're going to see some very good matchups for the top players here on the Empire. Here we go. Empire coming back down the field, moving the disc quickly. It's number 29, Chris Grenner with the disc, and he throws it away, looking for Goose Santos. Can't get it, and so Rochester looking to move it back up the field. A huge grab right there for Rochester, and moving back up here. Here's Smith. Smith swings it back to the center. It's Dan Wang waiting in the middle of the field. A big layout and a nice play there for the Empire, and they've got the disc back. Here's Carnegie. Carnegie finds Chris Grenner. Grenner just turned it over. Let's see if he can get a better throw off this time. Gets it to Jack Marsh. Marsh with the around flick. Can't find Carnegie. Again, looking for it. So close. Carnegie just... Most players would not even get close to that disc.
And that's the playing style we've been talking about. He's hitting the ground a lot. Have to wonder how Coach Bell is feeling about one of his top players bidding for discs at the end of the game here.
Jack Marsh coming up with a really pretty over-the-top D right there, and they're moving quickly in transition. Rochester looking a little tired, and there it is. CJ Ouellette finding him in the end zone. It's 20-13, and New York continuing to cruise downwind. And New York feeling good here with just a few minutes to go here in the fourth quarter, 20-13. Looking forward to having a little post-game show here. I'm going to talk to some of the players, Coach Bell after the game, and talk about what the expectations are heading into the season and what they're hoping to do. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the New York Empire in the American Ultimate Disc League. Score 20-13. About 4 minutes to go here in the fourth quarter, and what we've seen so far is really just a more athletic New York team taking advantage of their height and speed to beat a Rochester team that's missing some players for college series, and of course missing their coach as well. Back in play here, New York pulls the disc to about half field. It's where we've seen most of the pulls going so far today. And here comes Rochester, and they're going to look deep right away. A throw all the way across the field, and there's nobody there. A perfect throw, very nice stuff. But there appears to be a call. The disc is coming back, and they called an offensive. That must have been a travel. And the disc is going to be in the Empire's hands. It's hard to see what happened over there on the far sideline. ref's not showing motions about what happened there, but an instant turnover, and that really hurts after a very nice throw. Would have put the Rochester back within 6. And Lu Wang finds number 16, Mike Drost, who throws the hammer down the field just outside the end zone, and the Empire punch it in. A very nice play with the spike. It's 21-13, and the Empire starting to run away with this one.
Everything's going in the Empire's direction today. Those are some amazing throws, and honestly, some fortunate catches in a lot of situations.
Yeah, and it shows you the penalty that a travel can cause you there. You make a perfect throw all the way across the field, and it hurts to get that one turned back over. 3 minutes to go here in the fourth quarter. The score 21-13, the New York Empire leading it. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the American Ultimate Disc League. And although it's chilly here in New York, the wind has died down, and it's actually not so bad at this point.
It's really not. This is in a lot of ways the perfect conditions for an Ultimate game. The wind is not a factor for players of this caliber with this experience, at least not since the sun has gone down, which usually happens here in New York. After the sun goes down, the wind dies down a little bit. And it's made for some pretty exciting plays here at the end of the game.
And here it goes, the pull, a very nice deep pull from the Empire. Rochester looking to keep some nice offensive possessions going. That's Zach Smith with the disc. And Zach with the disc again, swinging it over to the sideline here. That's number 81, Kevin Quinlan with the disc. Finds it across the field to Glouser. But number 28 grabs the disc out of the sky. Philip K, nice D. Gets the disc over to Mike Drost. Here, back to the middle.
Swings it over.
And a big huck. Looking for Izzy Bryant, but that disc's going to float well out of bounds. An ambitious
parking
throw.
lot.
Almost into the parking lot.
Zach Smith.
And Rochester will get the disc back. Opportunity to move back up the field.
Back to the double teams and working for them all
There's
night.
the hammer. Oh, a dicey throw from Rochester, but they come down with it. And then they throw one deep over the head of the deep here. Oh, and a nice use of the field size right there, getting the disc over to number 3, Harrison Schwartzer, who's waiting for a cutter to get open. As underneath, he finds TJ Burns, who flips it into the end zone. That's a score. It's 21-14. And that's the first time we've seen a really strong attack and transition from Rochester.
Yeah, and they moved the disc upfield pretty easily that time. Now that the wind has died down a little bit, the Empire's use of the double team to force the over the top, it's not going to be as effective. And with the wide field, the zone downfield is just, it's not quite as intimidating as it is on the smaller fields that we're used to.
Yes, and with about 2.5 minutes to go, this one's a lock for the Empire. If you're coaching in this game, what do you do in these last 2.5 minutes?
You got to use this to teach. There are a lot of guys on these teams that have not. At this point, we haven't seen every player on both teams even go into the game, so they don't have any experience with the AUDL rule set and real game. You've got to get them in the game, get them as much experience as possible. It's just like in college football. In a game like this, you would see backup quarterbacks go in probably earlier than they're opening up the lines here.
Yeah, and we see the Empire offensive line out there missing most of their top guys. Hussein Carnegie on the sideline now. Get some handlers some run. This is Seth Canetti, who's been playing on O all day. But we're going to expect to see more open lines, and that's what we're seeing from Coach Bell. And back to Canetti here. He's looking upfield. Nobody open. Now waiting. Swings the disc into the middle of the field. All the way around. Auerbach finds number 8, Brenton Hard on the far sideline. 17, Matthew Stevens with the disc. Finds Canetti. Canetti just yards outside the end zone. Gets it back to Matt Stevens. Stevens waiting, holding, looking, finds a cutter open, and there it is. Punches it in. 22-14. Empire moving. We have 1 minute to go here in the fourth quarter in Manhattan. It's 22-14, keeping it moving, and another upwind score for the Empire. I mean, I think although the wind has died down, that's still a nice play.
Oh, absolutely. The wind is not even a factor anymore. The Empire moving up the field at will, even though they've opened up their lines. You know, you got to think that Coach Bell wants all of his young players available to him at this point to get them experience. Even though we know we have a few of them who aren't on the active roster tonight, they could certainly be using this as an experience builder. But you know, unfortunately, they're going to end this game right now pretty. You know, the energy's died down.
Absolutely, and you know, that's to be expected. As they started to pull away, you know, Jack Marsh on the sideline wearing a sweater at this point, and just waiting to let this one ride out. The pull up from the New York Empire, 22-14. And you know, what are we going to expect to see from the Empire going forward this season?
Well, next week is a big test for them against Toronto. They're going to certainly want to build on this. You know,
and a turnover from Zach Smith there, just a drop. And that's been the story of this game for the Rochester Dragons, just unable to keep control of the disc. And it hurts. It hurts to have those turnovers, especially close to the end zone like that.
Certainly. The Dragons are certainly...
And we've got a timeout on the field.
Yeah, moving forward, the Dragons, you know, I can imagine they're going to have a long talk on their way home about how this security is just... It's crucial to these games. You cannot give a skilled team as many shots as the Dragons have given the Empire if you want to stay competitive.
With a few 50 seconds to go in the game, it's 22-14. The Empire lead the Dragons. You're listening to Ultiworld's coverage of the American Ultimate Disc League. And yeah, you know, one of the things that I'm going to be interested to see from the Empire is how do they match up with a more physical and fast team, and that's what we're going to see next week from the Rush. The Rush have almost all 6-footers on their team. It's going to be a challenge because although New York has some height, they don't have across-the-board height like Toronto.
Right, and you know, this is where the speed of the Empire is going to come into play. They may not have the height, but you know, they're going to look to outrun the bigger guys who generally do not have quite the top-end speed of the some of the guys that we see here on the Empire. You know, one thing I've just noticed is we're talking about how they're using this as a learning opportunity. For the Empire to call a timeout at this point in the game, you know that their coach wants them practicing this end zone offensive set. They haven't been necessarily fantastic at it the entire game, even though they've been pretty effective. And they're using this as an opportunity to get these guys these touches.
Lu Wang picks up the disc, throws a little inside-out backhand that gets blocked by a nice layout.
Great D.
Beautiful D there from Rochester. And that's TJ Burns, who's just really had a great game on both sides of the disc. And Glouser turns the disc over. Number 10, Izzy Bryant picks up. Gets it over to Matthew Lamar. Downfield to Gabe Page. Wang with the disc on the far side. Taking a little more safe option after turning that last one over. Mike Drost puts it into the end zone. Is he in? He is! The referee calls him in. That's his score for the Empire, 23-14. With just seconds to go in the fourth quarter. Another nice play from the Empire, and the playmaking has just been great from them on both sides of the disc.
The Empire seems to have a flair for the dramatic. They've now scored in the last minute of every quarter?
And it's, the Empire have shown a very good ability, and I think we haven't talked about this too much, of just being strong in transition. Both to go from offense to defense and vice versa, which is a very important part of Ultimate, especially on a field like this where there's so much room to get open. Being with your defender or with the offensive player in transition is really important, and you can also take advantage of that on the offensive side.
Definitely, and what's even more impressive is that a lot of times in transition, the Empire is especially when they're transitioning from offense to defense, they're coming out in a zone look, which is a little bit harder to do, especially on a field this size where we've already talked about how difficult it can be to play a zone from sideline to sideline. But they've been able to transition into zones and then into man if they need to, getting down further down the field. And all aspects of their game have looked pretty solid for an early for such an early point in the season.
Minnesota wind chill leading the Indianapolis Alley Cats 26-19, but with 15 seconds to go, let's see if Rochester can punch one in before the end of the game. Here's Will Sloan, 5 seconds to go, disc down the field, and it's blocked. Bryant makes a play, comes up a little short in the hamstring, but that's the game. The New York Empire take it 23-14, and they put a win in the win column in their first week in the AUDL, and that's got to feel good.
It's a great way to start the season for the Empire. They came out, not only did they take care of business, but they won handedly. There was very, aside from very early on in this game, the Dragons just were not in it. This was the Empire's game to lose most of the game, and unfortunately for the Dragons, they did not oblige.
Yeah, and I think although the Empire started off the game a little sloppy, a lot of turnovers from both teams, they looked really strong in the middle of that game when they really went on their run to get ahead in this game. Their main O&D lines looked great, and they didn't have a problem scoring in either direction despite the wind.
Certainly, once they had the momentum behind them, kind of midway through the first half, they built on that and they never looked back. They looked like the stronger team here. They certainly deserve to win, and this is a win that going into a tougher game against the Toronto Rush next week, they're going to want to win on and carry that momentum into the next week.
And what is it that the Empire need to improve upon in order to have a chance against the Rush? I don't think they can play like this and beat the Rush next week.
It's kind of hard for us to say at this point because the Dragons didn't do a great job of exposing many weaknesses on the Empire. When we see them up against a more sound team next week, that's when we're going to see the cracks in the armor and what they're going to have to be working on throughout the really long season.
If you're just checking in, it's 23-14 is your final score here in New York. We're about to jump on the horn with Aaron Bell, the coach of the Empire, who took every chance in this game to get his team all working well, even when they were way up in the game.
How you doing, guys? How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm great. It's exciting to be out here. The team played really well. Getting our first victory at home feels awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. The game started off a little sloppy with the wind. Both teams with a lot of turnovers. How did you guys make some adjustments there at the end, sort of the midway through the first half to start to put some breaks on the board?
That's a great question. I mean, we knew it was going to be a little windy. We actually thought there might be a little precipitation, but the guys have been playing with a lot of focus over the last month, and we've been working on spacing. Our horizontal game is looking really good, allows us to get to the sideline, find some open lanes even when it's windy, and that gives us some pretty good looks. We expected to see a little bit more zone from their defense, and in the end, you know what, they didn't bring that. So I felt like our guys had it easy, and we didn't have to really overthink the way we played the wind. Most of our horizontal lanes were open, and once we were able to get that first break, it kind of opened up the game in terms of our confidence, and our zone looked really good.
Yeah, we were surprised to see so much zone, but it seemed like your double team was very effective in getting the Dragons to throw over the top into your taller and more athletic defenders.
Yeah, I think that's a big tribute to the guys who played pro last year that we've got on our team. They see the effectiveness that allows us to get a little bit more intensity at practice. And the guys who are new, you know what, it turns out we've got a pretty deep line of guys, and it allows us to be very competitive when we're learning those fundamentals. And you're right, the double team is huge for this game. In our zone, we try to put a lot of pressure on throwers. And you saw we were able to get quite a number of turnovers, and then we've got a pretty systematic offense on the turn to turn that into something. So, you're right. The double team looked great. Our deeps played awesome, and that allowed us to put pressure on their middle field.
You we're basically expected to win this game. So this is sort of a warm-up for your big test next week against the Toronto Rush. What do you need to improve upon in practice this week to be ready for that Rush team who blew out DC today 30-13?
Yeah, I heard about that. Congratulations to them. I mean, it's always good to see another team winning. But, we believe that we've got what it takes to play any team in this league. We've got quite an arsenal of strategy. We've got a couple different looks, both on the O and D lines. And, the 20 guys played a lot tonight, and we got everybody reps so that we could be prepared. We know who our starters are, and that makes a lot of competition for the next 6 in our 20 roster. So, that feeds us. Of course, we want to come out and make a statement each and every game. We've got every game is always kind of going to be new. We'll look at tape. We'll look at how we can improve. But really, it's about us. We've got our own agenda. And regardless of who the team is that we're going to see week after week, we just want to focus on the things that we're trying to work on, we're trying to build so that we look good to ourselves come the end of the season.
And we're about to get set to talk to Hussein Carnegie, who had a spectacular game, especially in the first half.
Sure did.
What did you think about his play
fantastic.
today?
I mean, the guy was making plays. The first half was his, amazing layouts. Any disc within reach, it would stick to his hand. Great throw choices, and we're just proud to have a player like that on the team. Want to thank you guys for calling a great game. Hope to see you just as happy with our next victory.
Sounds good, Coach. Thanks for coming on with us, and congratulations on the win.
All right, thanks again.
Appreciate it. That was Aaron Bell on with Ultiworld here at the New York Empire game that they just won 23-14. Final here in New York, crowd clearing out. It's a little chilly this evening, but one more interview before we wrap up our post game here. We're on with Hussein Carnegie, who finished the game with, I believe, 5 scores and 2 or 3 assists, a handful of Ds. We'll have to take a look at the full stat sheet at the end of the game. Thanks for coming on with us, Hussein. How'd the game go for you today?
I thought it was pretty good. Definitely a work in progress. I think offense has a lot to do in terms of like stack maintenance and just sort of sustained effort from the cutters. But overall looked great. Great for first performance. I thought D-line did great. Sideline was up, and the crowd looked great.
Yeah. Of course, you played in the AUDL last year with the Connecticut Constitution.
Yep.
How does this sort of compare to your first game there in Connecticut?
Pretty similar environment, actually. I think that both this team and Constitution did a really good job of just sort of like reaching out to the local fan base. So I thought that, crowd was really up for this one. I thought that, DJ did a great job, and, the atmosphere was really kind of hyped, and it was a lot of fun playing in front of that. And similarly with the team execution, I think both teams are sort of in similar places. Like, it was nice. This team, I think, has a better grasp of the rules and just sort of how the field is going to affect play, just because we have a few people who played last year. And I think we've all taken a lot of lessons from that. But overall, pretty similar.
Yeah, what do you think worked well today, but what do you still need to work on as you get ready for the Rush, probably the top team in the East next week?
Right. I guess things that worked well were just, when we moved it quickly, that really helped, especially when you're working with such a wide field. The offense has an advantage if you can get the defense moving. And so things I thought kind of closed and sort of jammed up for us when we held onto the disc till stall 5, stall 6. But when we, picked it up and moved it immediately to our first and second cutters, things looked really good. Flow looked good. I think we took shots in rhythm, and that's what I think sort of was pretty effective.
What do you need to do to get ready for next week?
Some of it, as a team, I think we have lots of sort of simple things. Sort of like stack maintenance, I think, will be a big one. I think that a lot of our deep shots looked kind of dicey at times just because we were starting our cuts from 20, 30 yards out. So they ended up hanging and becoming 50-50s. And then also just sort of trust, we're still sort of a new team, and I think we're still working out chemistry issues. And that just will always affect your, particularly your offensive movement and then your defensive communication. So just as we get to know each other in practice, see how each other play in games, I think that will just sort of start to come along naturally.
last question here. You guys sort of started out the game a little shaky, both teams with a lot of turnovers. The wind, I think, a factor. Maybe the crowd, a bit of a factor. What started to lock you guys in go midway through the first half when you went on your run to start to pull away in this game?
Primarily the D-line. I thought a lot of it just had to do with D-line's offense. Initially they were generating turns just fine, but just seemed a little bit hesitant picking up the disc. And so, they did a great job getting Ds, and then they pick up, get stuck on the sideline, not see their first option open, and then just kind of get jammed up there. But then we sort of came out, and I thought that, Izzy and Lou did a really great job of just picking up and moving it within first 2 seconds of the stall. And then, we were able to use our athleticism to get open from there on out.
What did Coach Bell talk about, especially late in the game as you were getting ready to, you're basically taking the game over at that point.
Right.
What kinds of adjustments was he having you guys make?
A lot of it, especially late game, is just maintaining focus. Sort of for us, the emphasis is getting better every point. So, it's, nothing changes from the first quarter to the fourth quarter. You're still playing 100%. You're still sort of going through the exact same offense you went through in the, initially. And I think his big point was just like, we still have to put in effort. We still have to work on our dump movement. We still have to, work the disc earlier. And just sort of keeping that focus was really important to us, holding on to a lead as it went.
Great. Well, hey, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Congrats on the great game and the W.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
We're here. This is Ultiworld's coverage of New York Empire and post-game here. The Empire came away with a 23-14 win and looked good doing it. They're getting set for a tough game next week against the Rush. But until next time, we're signing off here. I'm Charlie Eisenhood alongside Wes Cronk. And we'll see you next week for the Toronto Rush game as they get set to come here into New York City. And we'll see you at 7 o'clock a week from tonight. This was Ultiworld's coverage of the American Ultimate Disc League. The New York Empire came away with a 23-14 victory.